Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Deku was inspired by Aizawa's hair makeover? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. When Aizawa had started teaching at UA, he'd had the option to turn down pro hero work. Most pros never stopped working completely. Even after retirement they still were there to lend a hand in emergencies, and in UA this had proved to be more helpful than Principal Nizu had hoped for. Regardless, it still was uncommon for the teachers to hold up 2 jobs full-time. But hell, Mike had 3. Aizawa had opted to do as much pro work as possible when he signed his teaching contract. With the popularity of pros on the rise thanks to merchandising and increased media reports, underground work was becoming less and less prominent, so teaching had seemed like the most stable route for a steady income for someone like Aizawa. Like hell was he letting the underground career die out with him though. The thought of fame and popularity that came with most hero work nowadays made him shudder. But because of that, Aizawa often found himself out on patrol on a weekday. Perfect for an insomniac like him. It was about half an hour before he was due out this current Wednesday, and the pro decided that coffee was what was needed. It was approaching 9 p.m., so most of the students had already eaten dinner and were either milling about the common room or doing work in their rooms, but as Aizawa turned the corner into the kitchen, he came face to face with Ishido, Yairzu, Jiro, and Hagakure. "Sensei." Ishido cried with so much excitement Aizawa could have probably rethought the coffee. "Are you going on patrol tonight?" "Yes," Aizawa replied wearily, searching the back of the cupboards for the coffee filters. There was a buzz between the 4 girls as they moved, as one, round the kitchen counters to the sofas just outside. Aizawa caught glimpses of conversation as he made a drink. "This would be perfect. Do you have everything you need? He won't be angry, will he?" Aizawa turned on his heel and faced the group, but Ishido beat him to it. "Sensei, can we do your hair?" "No," he replied, turning back. "But please. You won't regret it, I promise." Ishido pleaded, Aizawa scowling from his turned position. "It's a good idea. And you'll look cool," Hagakure added, doing some sort of pose with her arms. Aizawa envisioned finger guns. Jiro shrugged in confirmation, a grin on her face, and even Yairzu was curling her own hair round her fingers looking up at her teacher. "It won't take a moment," she said. Aizawa stared down at his students, their hopeful faces beaming up at him. He looked at his watch, 25 minuets before he was due out. He eyed up his coffee, still brewing. "Will it be less than 5 minutes?" he asked. There were gasps. "Definitely," Ishido confirmed. "Only if I can drink coffee at the same time," he replied, picking up his cup. There was a commotion between the girls as they ran round to the sofas, moving their work so Aizawa could sit down. Hagakure was even jumping in the air. Aizawa sat and placed his coffee down on the table in front of him, not sure of what to do with all this attention from his students. Luckily Ishido, Hagakure and Yairzu were stood behind him. Only Jiro sat next to him, using her fingertips to scrap loose bits of hair, carefully out of his eyes and away from his scar. Ishido was much firmer with her actions as she started combing her teacher's hair through her fingers, pulling it up to the top of his head. Hagakure would interject with "missed a bit" and "oh over there," and Yairzu was handing the pink skin girl hairbands and hair clips as she pleased. All the girls seemed comfortable and happy with their work, pleased to be working on their teacher's hair. It was a nice feeling for Aizawa, not that he'd admit that. A couple of minuets after they'd started, Jiro pulled away from her teacher with a grin plastered on her face, looking at him front on and then up to the girls. "It looks sick," she smiled. "Oh, let me get a mirror," Ishido cried, coming round to look at her handiwork as she did. "Actually, Hagakure, can you grab yours?" "Sure," came the reply, and Aizawa heard footsteps pad off in one direction. "Can I move yet?" Aizawa asked. "2 seconds, you have to see what we've done first." Ishido pleaded, and Aizawa resigned, grabbing his coffee once more. Hagakure returned once more, a mirror floating in the air towards Aizawa's face. "Here you go," she smiled as the mirror came to a stop. Aizawa looked and stared. His hair had been dragged up in what seemed to be a tight top knot, tied by a few hairbands and decorated with an assortment of clips. It billowed out of one side almost fashionably but stayed in place as he turned from side to side. Now when you use your quirk your hair won't give it away. Ashido beamed, gauging her teacher's reaction. Aizawa stared at her dumbfounded. It was Ashido's idea, Yaoyorozu smiled. Try it, Jiro prompted. And so, Aizawa, who wasn't used to such an audience, did. His capture weapon rose to fit into his hands and his eyes glowed their usual red, but his hair, although lifting slightly, stayed exactly where it was. It worked. Ashido beamed. Aw, neat. Jiro commented as well. Do you like it? Yaoyorozu asked, Aizawa staring back at his 4 smiling students. Yes, he finally managed, still startled at the simplicity of it. Thank you. Aizawa didn't think 4 girls could smile any wider. Right, let me hairspray it in place and then we'll leave you in peace, Ashido said, standing back round her teacher. Jiro lifted her hand to shield her teacher's eyes and Aizawa let her, closing them regardless. After a hiss of a hairspray can, the girls got up and padded back round to the kitchen. Good luck tonight, sensei. They all cheered before walking back to the main corridor of dorms, chatting and giggling amongst themselves. Aizawa was left in the kitchen, raising his hand to feel his new hairstyle. On patrol, nobody commented on the new look or the pink butterfly clips, and by the next day Aizawa had called Ashido, Yaoyorozu, Jiro and Hagakure to his room. Once they'd knocked he opened the door clutching at a pack of bobby pins. Teach me, he growled. The smiles on their damn faces. It wasn't uncommon for Class 1A to have a movie night in the dorms. It was a good way of keeping the students quiet, and it had been a long time since Aizawa had actually sat down and watched a movie series in its entirety. They were getting through Harry Potter because somehow neither Todoroki, Aizawa or Yurikaka had watched any of them, despite the fact that Yurikaka had read the whole book series. This particular Sunday the class were sat in the common room watching The Goblet of Fire. Aizawa had bagged himself the middle spot on the sofa with Yaoyorozu on one side of him and Yurikaka on the other. He'd put on his sleeping bag regardless and had zipped it up to the chin so he could fall asleep during the boring parts, because it was a movie and there were bound to be boring parts. Aoyama and Midoriya were awkwardly jumbled together on an armchair, and Jiro, Bakugo and Kirishima had bagged the other sofa, leaving the rest of the students scattered about the floor, Hagakure continually passing Todoroki popcorn kernels to pop with his quirk. They were about halfway through the movie when Aizawa felt a weight growing heavy on top of his right shoulder. He tried moving his leg but found a weight holding that down as well. He realized what had happened and sighed softly. Yurikaka had fallen asleep, her head resting upon the top of Aizawa's slumped shoulder and her body curled to the side, every once in a while shifting as she murmured in her dreams. Aizawa wasn't surprised. They'd had a hell of a week with the provisional licensing exam just gone and a double essay to complete this weekend. Even the most explosive of his students were subdued. No one else had seemed to notice the unconscious girl, so Aizawa felt content leaving her there. He knew what was coming up in the movie would no doubt cause a ruckus among the teenagers, which would no doubt wake her up. She'd get embarrassed and he wouldn't mention anything. Everything would work out fine. And hopefully before his leg went numb. It would have worked out fine if 10 minuets later he hadn't found himself floating. He was only about an inch off the sofa, but it was enough for him to notice where this could be heading. Yurikaka, he whispered softly so as not to disturb anyone else. The girl shifted in her sleep but didn't show any signs of waking. Brilliant. As it was, the weight of the poor girl across his leg was the only thing that was holding him somewhat to the ground. He tried looking down to erase her quirk, but he couldn't get a good enough look at her to do it, thanks to his sleeping bag. He also couldn't move his arms enough to get to the zip without toppling her weight and sending him straight to the ceiling like a novelty helium balloon. Yaoyorozu, he tried whispering, but the girl was engrossed in the movie, her eyes glossed over the screen. He tried nudging her with his hand in the sleeping bag but couldn't get it over far enough. Midoriya, he hissed, the boy being the second closest to where he was sat. The idiot child had definitely heard something but looked in the opposite direction suspiciously. This was ridiculous. Problem child, he tried with no luck. Midoriya. Problem child. Aizawa sighed. Deku. That got the boy's attention. Midoriya instantly whipped his head round with such a look of fear on his face it was almost pitiful. He stared doe-eyed at his teacher as Aizawa used his own eyes to point downwards at his situation. The teen instantly covered his face so as not to laugh, causing Aizawa's eyes to roll. "Would you just help me?" his teacher growled. "Oh yes, sorry sensei," Midoriya smiled softly, at this point Aoyama catching on to the situation. Midoriya leant across to his best friend and nudged her gently. "Yurikaka," he hummed. "Hey, wake up." But instead of waking up, the young girl decided to lean over to where Midoriya's arm was outstretched, curving her body towards him. "Wait, no dash." But it was too late. The instant the weight was off of him, Aizawa started rising in the air, slowly at first but then faster and faster as he grappled to remove himself from his sleeping bag. Yaoyorozu was so startled that she jumped out of her seat, causing the majority of Class 1A to turn their heads to watch as their teacher flounging midair like some sort of idiotic flying caterpillar having a Kaminari-induced electric shock. "Yurikaka." Round face. "Oh my god. Wake up. Yurikaka, get up." The whole class erupted calling and yelling at Yurikaka, the movie reaching a climax in the background. Yurikaka immediately came to with a shock, receding back into the sofa with a yelp. Oh, and releasing her quirk in the process. There was an almighty crash as the form of their homeroom teacher fell from the ceiling 2 meters up, straight onto the floor, narrowly missing Ida in the process. "Humph," he gasped as the wind shot out of him. "Ow," came the afterthought. "Aizawa-sensei, are you okay?" Ida cried, his arms going like a hyperactive windmill. "Yes, I'm fine," Aizawa grunted, getting up groggily from the floor. Yurikaka looked as if she had just murdered someone, staying completely silent as Aizawa unzipped his sleeping bag and stretched, cracking more than a few bones in the process. "It's a good cushion," he told nobody in particular, holding up his sleeping bag. "Sensei, I'm so sorry." Yurikaka finally cried, coming to her senses. "I didn't realize. You're not hurt, are you?" "I'm so sorry." "You're all right," Aizawa sighed. "I shouldn't have immobilized myself like that anyway. You caught me off guard," he smirked. "I didn't do it on purpose, I swear." Yurikaka continued to yelp as Aizawa shooed her away, getting back onto the sofa. He expected everyone to go back to watching the movie, but as he sat there were still 19 pairs of eyes on him. "I'm okay," he reiterated to his students. There was a split second and Ashido burst out laughing. "Oh god, you should have seen your cell dash." She was cut off by Aizawa's hair rising. "Can we rewind the movie?" "I missed a bit," Todoroki said from nowhere. The boy hadn't moved an inch, his eyes still on the screen as he turned back to his classmates in confusion. "Did you just miss that whole thing? What the hell, icy hot? Did you not see what just happened? Todoroki, you're a beast." And the class erupted again. Please leave a comment on your way out and I'll be sure to reply XX. Chapter text. At UA, most of the lunchtime meals were already provided for. There was a nutritionist on site, like most schools in Japan, and the food was catered towards building up muscle and fueling the students' brains. After the dorms were added, the problem of breakfast and dinner came into view. There could have been caterers on site, but the school was lacking funding as it was due to the expansion. So, after much discussion, Principal Niza decided that the school would just order in their food per dorm. That way the students could eat whatever, whenever they wanted when they weren't in classes. Which in turn meant that every Sunday, Aizawa had to sit down with his entire class and shop online through the new UA system. That concept lasted for a week. Because it took 20 minuets for Aoyama to choose the type of chocolate milk he wanted, so Aizawa gave that up before he murdered the boy. Nowadays, he texted Hizashi to come up to the floor, and after bribing him with the thought of spending as much time together as possible after they'd done, the pro usually took to dramatically standing on a table. A good thing in hindsight. Kaminari, Ida, and Azui, who were lounging on the sofas, only just managed to plug their ears. Yo. Listen, you listenerersis. Your ever thoughtful and insanely talented teacher dash. Cut that out, Aizawa growled from beneath him. Is doing the shopping list? So get your orders in, yeah. All right, enough, that'll do, Aizawa said, pulling him down from the table. Got any snacks? Hisashi asked immediately, deactivating his quirk and stretching up slightly. I'm about to do the shopping, what do you think? Aizawa snapped, opening his laptop and sitting at the kitchen table. Kaminari was bashing one side of his head in an attempt to unblock his ears, and Azui was hiding herself under Ida's forearm, Ida simply shell-shocked from the noise, sitting like a plank in the middle of the sofa. Oh, someone's angry, Hisashi teased, poking Aizawa's cheek. It's okay. I'll find something. And with that he took to the cupboards. Aizawa grunted in reply, logged into the shopping account and getting started with the basics. Rice noodles. Soba noodles. Soy sauce. Sensei? Aizawa looked up to see the faces of Midoriya and Koda smiling back at him, Koda holding a list. Aizawa held out his hand and the boy passed it over. The pro-hero skimmed it and nodded. It was mostly bird seed and hay, supposedly for some of the many creatures Koda had befriended on campus. Usually it would have to come out of the students' own funds, but due to Koda's quirk, UA would cover it. You need anything? He asked Midoriya, grabbing a pen from his back pocket to add to the handwritten list. Yes. Midoriya stuttered. I found biscuits. Hisashi cried from behind them. Aizawa ignored him. Can I possibly get some brie? Midoriya finished. You what now? Aizawa asked, eyebrows raised. Oh, well, it's cheese, Midoriya added, his hands trying to overdramatically accentuate every point. I'm aware of that. Well, it's because Aoyama dash. It's on the list, Aizawa sighed, cutting the boy off. The last thing he needed was a 3-minute explanation on cheese. Thank you. Midoriya smiled before bouncing off, Koda following him, signing in conversation as he did. Koda could ask about the damn brie. Aizawa looked back to the screen as Hisashi sat next to him, shoving a biscuit under his nose. One, he smiled. Those are bakugas, Aizawa noted. He'll kill you? I'll take my chances, Hisashi grinned as Todoroki crossed the corridor. He looked over at the table and raised one eye. Shopping, he asked. Yeah. Hisashi replied for the two. Anything you want, kiddo? Soba, Todoroki said simply. On the list, Aizawa replied and Todoroki gave a nod, walking off. How about you guys? He called to the sofas. No thank you, Aizawa-sensei. Ida cried. I trust your judgment. Good, Aizawa replied. Earplugs? Kaminari grinned at Hisashi. Oi, cut it out, little zappy listener. Hisashi called back. Seaweed? Azui asked, appearing from under Ida's arm. Sea salt, soy sauce, or wasabi flavor? Aizawa asked, scrolling through the website. Sea salt please, Azui replied. Thank you, sensei. No problem, he smiled back. He unashamedly had a lot of time for the student. As he was adding it to the basket, Todoroki walked back in, hanging slightly in the doorway. Are those Bakuga's biscuits? Yeah? Hisashi asked. He'll kill you, Todoroki warned before walking away once more. Hisashi replied by taking another out of the packet. There was quiet for a while. Yaoyorozu came in asking for full-fat milk to aid in her quirk training, then offering to make Aizawa a cup of coffee, which he gratefully accepted. Sato asked for more baking powder and cupcake cases for his baking. He was the only student really allowed food in his room. Ashido requested blister plasters and Jiro asked for a specific type of tofu. Apparently she was making miso soup for everyone's breakfast next week. Aizawa wrote them down and added them to the list, sipping his drink. 6 pints of full-fat milk. 6 pints of semi-skimmed milk. Baking pow. Excuse me, Aizawa-sensei? Aizawa looked up at Uraraka and mustered a smile. How can I help? He tried, with as little sarcasm as possible. He didn't mean it. Uraraka was a gifted, strong-willed student. He was just tired. Can I put porridge on the list? She asked tentatively. I know I'm the only one that really eats it and I'm running out. Yes, of course, Aizawa replied, typing it into the search box and twisting the screen round. What flavor? Oh, just the cheapest is fine, the girl insisted. How about this one? Aizawa pointed. It's got extra protein or something and it's on offer. Uraraka turned her hair over her fingers. This measly shop won't make a dent on UA's budget, he assured her. He knew that living on the poverty line was something that Yurikaka was painfully used to, and so reassuring her that here at UA she was paid for was an ongoing issue. Okay, she agreed, smiling. Thank you. It's all right, he replied, flipping the screen back towards him. Want a biscuit? Hisashi asked the girl. God, Aizawa had forgotten he was there. Are those bakugus? Yurikaka asked tentatively. Hisashi replied. No thank you then. I'd like to live to see next week, Uraraka stated, so seriously it caused Aizawa to snort and nearly choke on his coffee. Hisashi mumbled through a mouthful of crumbs, but the teen had joined Azui and Ida on the sofa. Aizawa went back to the list. Cupcake cases. Aizawa added some half-priced silver sugar sprinkles to the list. He knew Sato would appreciate it. Tofu. And if Jiro was planning on miso soup, then he knew for a fact they needed more. Miso paste. As Aizawa moved on to veg, more students trailed in. Ojiro, Shoji, Hagakura and Siro were in charge of cooking for the evening meal, and as they started preparing food around their two teachers, they double-checked the cupboards for any essentials their teacher may have missed. Are you staying for dinner, Mike? Ojiro asked his teacher as he started cutting up carrots behind him. Oh, I'm not hungry. Hisashi beamed back at him. It's looking good though. He's been eating Bakugu's biscuits, Aizawa commented pointedly. Bakugu's? Shoji asked suspiciously. Whoa, that's brave. Siro laughed from the fridge. I hope he doesn't get angry. Hagakure agreed. No, he'll kill you, Ojiro deadpanned. Aizawa smirked at Hisashi's confused face before going back to the task at hand. No one had requested anything that wasn't already in the cupboards, and Tokoyami and Mineta wanted things that UA wouldn't offer to pay for. Why do you want black paint and noise-canceling foam? He'd questioned them. Room improvements, Mineta suggested. Use your own money, Aizawa growled. Tokoyami, I appreciate your getting Dark Shadow accustomed to the dark, but there are other ways to do it. He didn't ask why Mineta wanted to block the sound from his room. He didn't want to know. And yes, Aizawa started, noticing Tokoyami's gaze moving from him to Hisashi. Those are Bakugu's biscuits. Good luck, he'll kill you, Tokoyami said gruffly before the two boys moved away. What is with you kids? Hisashi cried but got no reply. Aoyama walked through the room in silk pajamas as Aizawa was adding cabbage to the list. Want any brie? He teased, causing the boy to turn in surprise. Pardon? He asked, clearly having no idea what his teacher was talking about. Hey, Aoyama. Hisashi called, getting restless beside his best friend. How do you spell biscuit in English? He quizzed the poor boy in phonetic English. Aoyama translated what his teacher was saying, stared at him for a second, then stared at the packet in Hisashi's hand, his eyes widening, before replying, again in perfect phonetic English. R3. This time Aizawa did choke on his coffee, and Ida had to run over to furiously pat him on the back until his teacher winced for him to stop. Once Aoyama and Ida had settled down on the sofas with the rest of their classmates, Aizawa went through the finished shop, adding coffee filters and sweetener to the list. He clicked on the checkout button and looked up. Right, I'm paying. Is there anything else anyone can think of? He asked no one in particular, seeing as most of his students had wandered over to the common room area, waiting for dinner. There were various shakes of heads, and Aizawa was about to pay through UA's system when the door to the boys' rooms burst open. Wait, Aizawa, came a growl, and round the corner Bakugu appeared, seemingly dragging Kirishima behind him. Bakugu looked like he'd had a fight with a red felt-tip pen and lost, his fingertips and palms bright red, his sleeves rolled up. Kirishima looked even worse for wear. He was wearing a stained t-shirt and his hair was covered by a bright, all-might beanie. Bakugu tossed his best friend forwards in front of the teachers, one of which was trying to suspiciously hide his biscuits wrappers. What happened? Aizawa growled. Ask him, Bakugu prompted, a pissed-off expression written across his face. Can you put hair dye on the list? Kirishima sighed, straightening up and looking sheepishly at his teachers and explosive classmate. That needs to come out of your personal money, Aizawa replied, his eyes narrowed. But I need it tomorrow. Please. Kirishima suddenly cried, bowing over the table. It's awful. What are you saying about my hair dyeing skills, eh? Nothing. You just didn't get the roots, man. Is that my hat? A voice suddenly piped up from the sofas. You told me to stay away from your scalp. Yeah, but not an inch away. Is that my hat? An inch my arse, shitty hair. I'll prove it. Give me a ruler. Is that my hat? Shut up, D. Of course it's your hat. It's an all-might hat. My all-might hat. Aizawa rubbed his temples. Kirishima, give Midoriya his hat back, he ordered. It can't be that bad. To us. There was a tricolor mix of shades in Kirishima's hair, from the dark black roots to the graying red clumps that made up the middle areas to the bright red tips and patches Bakugo had actually managed to cover. My hat's been dyed as well, Midoriya muttered from beside them. It was already red, you idiot, Bakugo snapped at him. You'll both be paying for a new hat for Midoriya, Aizawa scooted. And Kirishima, you'll be paying me back for the hair dye, he finished, clicking back on the computer. He didn't get paid enough for this. Really, you'll add it? Thank you, sensei. Kirishima cried as he ran round the table to pick out the color he needed. I'm only doing this because I know otherwise you won't actually turn up to class tomorrow, Aizawa warned. Get someone else to dye your hair next time or there'll be bigger consequences. He expected Bakugo to explode again, but he didn't. Yes, sensei, thank you, sensei, Kirishima gabbled. You don't have to pay for the hat, Midoriya said, still inspecting the damage. It was your property and they damaged it, they'll both be helping to replace it, Aizawa confirmed. Got it, Bakugo? But Bakugo wasn't listening. He had his eyes narrowed on the floor beside Hisashi's feet, his hands charging up and flickering. Hisashi himself had paled slightly and the entire room had silenced. Did you eat my creamy strawberry Hello Panda biscuits? Bakugo spat in a low whisper. Aizawa was too busy putting hair dye into the shopping basket to immediately erase his student's quirk. Besides, the look on Hisashi's face was priceless. Mike whistled to himself as he walked down the corridor to Class 1A. It was nearly 11 a.m. and time for the class to take his English lesson. Usually he could hear them from this distance, the usual shouts of Bakugo or cries from Ida. But today nothing. As the pro-hero burst through the door, he was surprised to see all the students still sat at their desks, bent over their work. Mike sensei, the confused voice of Midoriya asked, looking up from his worksheet. Well, what are you doing here? I've come to teach you little listeners English, he cried energetically. Whoa, where's the energy gone, dudes? But it's... Wait, what? Jiro suddenly yelped, looking at the clock on the far wall. It's next lesson? What? Ida suddenly cried, standing wildly. But that means we've run over time for the test. That's cheating. How will we come back from the shame of being a class full of cheats? He continued muttering. Hell yeah. Kaminari beamed. Thank God for that. You still haven't finished, Jiro pointed out. But I was close, he retorted with a finger click. Where is Aizawa-sensei? Yaoyorozu piped up from the corner. Everyone turned to her, then around the classroom. He's here, Hisashi announced, pointing down to the floor beside their teacher's desk. More than a few of the students craned their heads over to look at what Mike was pointing at. Their homeroom teacher was curled in his sleeping bag, completely out of it, his mouth slightly open and his face relaxed. Is he dead? Todoroki asked. A few students laughed before realizing the boy was being serious, looking to their English teacher for a confirmation. If he's dead, what do we do? Contact his family? Does he have a family? He's got to have a family. Who says? Isn't there a rule that if someone dies in a test everyone passes? Kaminari. The rule is that you'd get your predicted grades, so either way you're screwed. But if he is dead, then there might still be time to perform CPR. We don't know how long he's been dead for though. So is he dead? What? No. Hisashi cried in response, silencing the class. Hold up, little listeners. He's just asleep. Someone collect the tests, I'll wake him up. The excitement over, Ida and Yaoyorozu pulled their chairs back and began to get up, others stretching and getting out their English books. Can't we play a prank on him? Jiro spoke up before she could stop herself. Hisashi, who was about to shake his best friend awake, turned to the young girl. Jiro! Ida cried. That is completely unacceptable behavior for a UA student. We have a reputation to uphold. Yeah, Hisashi agreed half-heartedly. What did you have in mind? He asked Jiro, his eyes glinting. Ida looked as if he was going to have a heart attack. Oh, I don't know, Jiro replied, a little startled by her teacher's response. Boring, Hisashi moaned. How about we see how many random objects we can put on his sleeping bag? Midoriya piped up. Like that game? What game? Uraraka asked. I used to play it as a kid, Midoriya replied. What was it called? Buckaroo, Bakugu snarled from beside him. It was called Buckaroo. Oh yeah. You were so good at it, Kaken. Shut up, Deku. I like it. Hisashi posed, pointing at the green-haired boy. How does it work? Well, we each take a turn putting something on top of Aizawa-sensei and then whoever wakes him up is the loser, he explained. Aw, sounds sick. Kirishima smiled. Ida's pulse rose. All right. Hisashi yelled in a whisper. Choose your weapon wisely and line up in an orderly manner. Let's go. Mike-sensei. Ida interrupted, hand held high. Shouldn't we really be learning English? Oh yeah. Hisashi smiled. Okay. Every item you put on your teacher has to be named in English first. Kaminari, who'd picked up his calculator to begin with, looked at the object with confusion before placing it down again. Todoroki announced, holding up his school shoe before placing it on top of the sleeping bag precautiously. There was a moment that it wobbled before it stayed delightfully in place. All right. Hisashi before being hushed by his giggling students. Todoroki smiled slightly before walking back to his seat. He's not dead, he confirmed as he did. Blama was next. Croissant. That's not an English word, Hisashi reprimanded. But it's not Japanese, we? Iwama replied, placing the wrapped snack inside Todoroki's shoe. Can he do that? Uraraka asked. Technically yes, Midoriya replied, looking at Bakugu for confirmation. The explosive boy just shrugged in response. Ashido placed her hairbrush on top of Aizawa's feet, Ojiro his pencil in front of that, and Sato somehow found a random icing pen shoved at the bottom of his bag to put on top of his teacher. Azui used her novelty pencil case and had managed to shove it inside the sleeping bag so Aizawa has something to cuddle. The atmosphere in the classroom was electric. Hairbrush. Pencil. Icing. Toy. Good, good. Hisashi whispered as they returned to their seats. Who's next? 10 minutes later, and their once peaceful teacher was littered with an assortment of objects. Only Bakugu, Ida, Midoriya, Jiro and Koda remained, and Hisashi had taken to filming the situation in hand. The students who had originally gone back to their seats were now out front again, and everyone was watching with bated breath for who would go next. The task had seemed easy at the start, but the more items they'd managed to place on their teacher, the more Aizawa had stirred in his sleep. They were so close now, the entire class rooting for their success, but the space on their teacher's sleeping bag was getting tight. The game was on. Snake, Koda signed to the group. Wah! Hisashi cried as Koda walked to his bag and pulled out a grass snake. I found it on the road this morning, the boy continued. I was going to place it back in the wild at lunch, he explained. Don't worry, he won't bite. Hisashi backed away, as Koda came forward, speaking softly to the animal before letting him loose to curl around the objects on the sleeping bag. That's my textbook he's lying on. Kirishima stuttered. Next. Hisashi croaked. Desk. Midoriya spoke up before returning to his own desk, placing his stuff on the floor and picking it up. There's kinda this side rule that allows you to place objects over a victim if they can still knock it over when they wake. As long as it's touching the person, it's allowed, he explained before placing the desk gently beside his teacher. He propped one side up against the wall, holding one of the legs against Aizawa's side so the desk leant on his covered-up arm. Holy shit, Kaminari grinned. Are we sure this is safe? Ida asked worriedly. Yeah, he shouldn't get too injured if he knocks it, Midoriya confirmed. Too injured? Ida reiterated. He looked around for their English teacher, but Hisashi had retreated to the back of the room, far away from the snake. It's your go, Midoriya beamed at him. Right, Ida sighed. I don't agree with this game, but I will participate dash. Just get on with it, Bakugu growled. Or he'll wake up during your go. Ida paled slightly and hastily went over to his desk. His classmates were expecting him to bring out something small, but instead, NCI Clo PDA? And Ida walked forward, clutching the heaviest item so far, to the front of the room. Where's that going to fit? Azui asked. It was a fair point. The sleeping bag was completely covered, to the point where items were overlapping each other. Ida didn't reply, simply walking round to the other end of his teacher. He crouched down and very, very carefully lowered the book down on top of his teacher's head. Oh, fucking way, Kaminari whispered as Ishido whacked him to shut him up. The whole class had their breath held, waiting, watching. The book wobbled to one side, sliding off of the yellow fabric, the student's breath hitching. Ida caught it, however, repositioning it and carefully, oh so carefully, lifting his fingers off. The entire class either jumped up or punched the air, hugging on another and grinning from ear to ear. Even Hizashi crept closer again, whipping his phone out once more. Most impressive so far, he announced, causing a hiss of annoyance from Bakugo. Ida smiled proudly before realizing what he'd just done. I'm going to be expelled, he whispered tearfully, Uraraka going over to comfort him. Who's next? Me, Bakugo replied before Jiro had a chance to pipe up herself. I can use anything I want to my advantage, right? Yeah. Okay. He smiled before walking over to Shiro. He whispered in his ear, the boy's expression changing from one of confusion to that of amusement. Sure, he whispered with a wink. He pulled away from the group, concentrating slightly as he activated his quirk. Tape shot out of his elbows and Bakugo collected it up, walking back to his homeroom teacher and beginning to tape the wall, pulling the material from one side to the other so it hung just over his teacher. I have to have it touching, right? He asked Midoriya. Right? Bakugo taped the loose end to the side of the sleeping bag. Trap, he pronounced as he stood up. The congratulated gasps from his students made the boy grin as he walked back to his group. Just Jiro left. Hizashi grinned with anticipation. There's no space left, she complained worriedly. Can I break the rules? She asked Midoriya. I guess it depends how and if the rest of the class say yes and… Okay, good, she smiled, reaching into her back pocket. I line, she pronounced carefully before walking around to her teacher. She knelt beside Aizawa and pulled off the top. Should I? She asked nervously. Yes. The class collectively beamed. Ida whimpered. Jiro took a breath and carefully pressed the pencil between her teacher eyebrows, filling in the space between them. Giggles echoed around the room, Hizashi zooming his phone in on his best friend's face. Jiro finished up and smiled back at her class. Give him a mustache? Ishido prompted. Really? Jiro grinned. Yes. And so Jiro leant down once more, holding her breath again and pressing the pencil down on the side of Aizawa's mouth, she curled the line around to form a curly mustache. And that's when things went ever so slightly wrong. Jiro was turning the last line around when she noticed her teacher's nose twitch in protest. Guys, she whispered. I think he's going to sneeze. There was a split second you could have heard a pin drop before. Shit, he's going to sneeze, Jiro cried this time out loud as she backed away. Shit. Guys. A couple of the boys ran round to pull her away from their homeroom teacher, the whole class, including Hizashi, backing away from Aizawa as he took a deep breath in and let out the loudest sneeze they'd heard. Ida's encyclopedia was the first to go flying. It would have landed back on Aizawa's head if Shiro's tape hadn't caught it midair. Items were falling off left, right and center at this point as Aizawa came to life, wriggling around in his sleeping bag. Midoriya's desk came down with a crash beside him as the pro hero shot up, getting tangled in the rest of the tape. He let out a cry, capture weapon rising dangerously before spotting Hizashi directly in front of him. Still holding his phone up. What the f***? He screamed. Good morning, Shota. Mike cried, unfazed by his reaction. You'd better have a good reason for this, Aizawa snarled, trying to pull away from the tape. Shiro, he growled dangerously. He looked to his left at the fallen desk. How the? He picked up the encyclopedia with his free hand flicking to the name printed in the front. Ida, he barked. Ida wished the ground would swallow him whole. No one told him he still had an eyeliner unibrow and half a mustache on his face. Where did this snake come from? Koda. Aizawa was halfway through emailing Principal Nizu the details of the training week the class had been on for the last 5 days, when the internet went. With a sigh, he clicked on the Wi-Fi icon on the top of his laptop screen, but the usual UA Wi-Fi wasn't showing up. Then he heard shouting. Realizing that something more was going on, Aizawa lifted himself from the desk in his room and poked his head outside. Oi, who turned out the lights? Dark Shadow return. Stop touching my Mineta. It's not that dark. Ow. Why the fuck has the TV gone off? Language. Aizawa yelled back, flicking the switch just inside his doorway to confirm what he already thought. The power had completely gone. Patting his way down the corridor to the kitchen, he turned towards a little cupboard just beside the sink. He flicked it open and clicked one of the buttons. There was a buzz and a click, and the lights came on, revealing the majority of his students in the common area. They were all in pajamas, Ashido, Siro, Kaminari and Kirishima hanging over the side of the sofas. Shoji was holding Uraraka in his arms, Ida on floor beside them, obviously having tripped over the girl, setting off his quirk. The ceiling was singed. Dark Shadow was roundhousing his master, Tokoyami just taking it with a thoroughly pissed-off look on his face, and Mineta was dangling above Yaoyorozu, arms outstretched, from Ajui's tongue. Every student had stopped to stare at their teacher. Aizawa pointed to the cupboard. Emergency lights, he explained before wringing his hair through his hands. The power was out for 20 seconds, how the hell dash? He didn't get to finish that thought before the room exploded into chatter again. Aizawa didn't have the energy to yell at them right away. Midoriya came into the room beside Aizawa, yawning and rubbing his eyes. What happened? He asked his homeroom teacher, somehow not noticing or caring that the rest of his classmates had descended into chaos. The power's gone, he explained. The emergency lights are on, but there'll be no electricity. Sorry if this woke you. No, it didn't, Midoriya replied. My all-might night light went off dash. Midoriya clamped his hands over his mouth before he could say any more. Aizawa raised one eyebrow at him. Midoriya whimpered. Right? You lot. Aizawa yelled, trying to get the class's attention. Be quiet, he yelled, stopping them in their tracks. Speaking of attention, Ida came to attention with the sudden volume of his teacher's voice. It is nearly 9:30, there are students asleep, and if you're not tired after the week we've just had, then you haven't been training hard enough. That shut them up. Aizawa twisted round to grab some coffee before he realized that there was no electricity to power the kettle. Crap. Now clearly the power has gone off, Aizawa continued whilst his students were muted. UA has emergency lights and radios, but that's about where it ends. There's no heating, no Wi-Fi and no power. So don't try anything stupid, he commanded. In vain. Aizawa-sensei, Aoyama called from the doorway in his usual sing-song voice. He entered the room, Todoroki close behind him. They both were carrying plastic bento boxes in their arms. I noticed that the power wasn't on, and I was just wondering whether that meant that the washing machines also weren't working, as all our clothes are still in there for classes tomorrow? Crap. Crap 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 crap. Why is that the most sensible thing you've said all week? Aizawa growled as Aoyama crossed him. What are you doing? I'm collecting my cheese, Aoyama replied, opening the box and placing it on the counter, Todoroki doing the same. Now there's no power, the fridge won't work, so Todoroki is going to keep my cheese cool, we? Crap, crap 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 crap. Todoroki grunted in response. He'd obviously been woken up by a blonde-haired visitor during the night. Suddenly there was a spark of electricity over by the sofas. Aizawa whipped his head around to spot Kaminari buzzing with electricity by the television. Aizawa's eyes ran red. Don't you dare, he warned before the boy could do something stupid. If you're going to use your quirk, use it for the fridge. Wait, no, Todoroki, you use your quirk for the fridge? The teen looked up at him and yawned. And the freezer, Aizawa added. Todoroki rubbed his eyes and placed one hand on the fridge, activating his quirk. There was a crackle and the whole thing became encased in ice. Including Aoyama. Todoroki, Aizawa growled. Pay attention. The boy looked sheepish and began unfreezing his classmate. Kaminari, instead of the freezer you can help power the washing machines. We don't need electricity for anything else, do we? Aizawa asked the teenagers. The TV, came a Kirishima-sounding shout. No, Aizawa sighed before beckoning the electric boy. He was too tired for this. He needed coffee. Oh wait, you could power the kettle? Kaminari grinned at his teacher, cracking his knuckles. Aizawa looked at him worriedly. Forget the kettle? But the washing machines, yeah? Yeah, come on then. I'm coming too. Aoyama cried excitedly. Yeah, sure, whatever, Aizawa replied. Oh, and the rest of you? Stay quiet. There are students asleep. Aizawa knew they weren't going to stay quiet. Who's asleep? Ashido cried. Bakugu. Now they be quiet. Aizawa, Kaminari, and Aoyama walked down the stairs to the basement and entered the washroom. Aizawa crouched down by the machines. There's 20 of them, do we need to power them all? He asked. Each machine has at least 2 students' clothes in it, so I'd say so, Aoyama replied. I can do it, sensei. Kaminari cried from the other side of him. It's a lot of power in a controlled space, Aizawa warned. It's okay, I can do it. Kaminari smiled, placing his hands on the generator. Aizawa gave him a nod. Upstairs, the class were still quietly arguing about mobile data hotspots when they heard a boom from downstairs. I'm guessing that didn't work then. Ishido smiled weakly. Hey, Ishido. Shiro called from beside her. What? Static shock, he cried, placing a hand on her shoulder and shocking the girl with his residual electricity. Gah. Fucking hell, Shiro. Ishido cried back, chasing him around the room with her own hands outstretched. Soon the rest of the class found out they could also give electric shocks thanks to Kaminari's power outburst. Stop chasing me, Uraraka. You are at an unfair advantage in Shoji's arms. Ida cried, running past Mineta, still being held by Azui. Don't you dare, she growled. No one really noticed when Aizawa and Aoyama walked back into the room, hair on end, twitching slightly. Aizawa was holding Kaminari by the collar so he didn't wander off in his docile state. Does anyone have a portable charger? Aizawa grumbled. Otherwise he's stuck like this until the power comes on. No one did. Crap. So who doesn't have clothes tomorrow? Aizawa asked to the room. Apart from those who were still asleep, the class was sat around the sofas, Azui having let go of Mineta and now had a hold of Kaminari, who was constantly walking into walls. It was 10 to 10. A few hands went up, including Aoyama, Ishido, Midoriya, and Uraraka. Can we have a pajama party tomorrow? Ishido suggested. As long as it doesn't look like pajamas, Aizawa replied tiredly. Yes. Uraraka and Ishido can have a look in my wardrobe if they want, Yaoyorozu suggested. Both of the girls looked up excitedly. Not as excitedly as Aoyama, however. Can I? He asked excitedly. Sure, Yaoyorozu smiled at him. Aoyama beamed at her, sitting up straighter in excitement. Sensei, a voice came from beside the homeroom teacher. Aizawa turned to see Uraraka crouched in a ball beside him. She had her normal pajamas on and a jumper over the top, however she was still shivering. Do we think we could do something about the heating? I'm really warm, Midoriya commented from the other side of the sofas. That's because you're sitting next to Todoroki, Shoji explained. Todoroki looked up to his classmates, and as he did it was clear to see that the teenager was using his quirk, one side of his face singeing slightly. Sorry, he muttered. No, this is good, Aizawa thought. The cold was getting a little unbearable and there was no sign of it stopping soon. We could make a fire. No, Kirishima. Wait, we could do with the right equipment, Yaoyorozu said. I don't know the exact mechanics for something like a portable stove though. Will you need the exact mechanics? Aoyama asked. Yes, or it'll be like the washing machines but worse, Aizawa interrupted. Aoyama's hands went immediately to his hair. It's too dangerous, Aizawa confirmed. Shame, Midoriya sighed. With a stove we'd have been able to make hot drinks. Look, I'm going to go to the main building, Aizawa sighed, getting up. See how far they are with getting the power back on. I'll bring a heater back if there's one spare. Be good, he warned. There was a mutter of "we wills" and "yes, sensei" as Aizawa changed shoes and began the descent to the bottom floor. He would be gone 10 minutes. The building better be standing when he got back. Inside of 1A the class were still milling over the heater idea. There must be something we can do, Kirishima complained. I just need the instructions or something, but there's no internet to look it up and I'm not sure if I can trust something from a web page anyway. Yaoyorozu started as Ida got up with a jolt. Wait! Ida suddenly cried. I have the perfect thing. The boy ran out of the room and returned a moment later with a book on how things worked. Why do you have this? Mineta asked as Ida passed the book along to Yaoyorozu. It was my favorite childhood story. Ida explained. It's not a story, but it tells the tale of our ever-growing evolution in mechanics and machinery. It is very inspiring. It's perfect, Yaoyorozu said as she landed on the right page. I can do it. The room looked at her expectantly. Just give me 5 minutes. 5 minutes later, the group encountered their next problem. It needs fuel, Todoroki confirmed. I have failed you all, Ida said solemnly. Sorry guys, Yaoyorozu sighed. It was a good idea in theory. Yeah. We'll be fine anyway, Uraraka cried. She was shivering. But we do have fuel, Jiro offered. The class turned to look at her with hopeful eyes. We have Bakugo, she smiled. His sweat, Kirishima cried. If Todoroki can make him hot enough, then we can take his sweat and use it? Oh yeah, that's amazing. Siro beamed. We can't do that, Ida said responsibly. But why? Kirishima grinned, noticing his classmate getting tired. I don't know, Ida sighed, fighting a losing battle. Because it's dangerous? Because he's dangerous? Let's do it. Uraraka cried from beside them. Uraraka, you're meant to be on my side. Ida protested. But I'm cold, she replied, placing her hands under Ida's pajama top. The taller boy jumped back in shock from the cold. Geez, he muttered. Hey, Uraraka, come over here, Todoroki called from the sofa, tapping his lap with one hand. Uraraka went over to where the boy was sitting and ended up on his lap like some sort of over-decadent heat pad. Better, he asked. Just, thank you Todoroki-kun, Uraraka smiled. So are we all in agreement? Jiro asked the group. Wake Bakugo up? You mean sweat Bakugo up? Kirishima grinned wildly. I think it would easier to wake him, Jiro replied. There was a pause before a few nods started up. Yeah, let's do it. Siro and Kirishima cried, with way too much enthusiasm. Yeah. Uraraka confirmed. But who do we send in? Tokoyami asked pointedly. Jiro grinned wildly before pointing to the side of the room. Him. The group turned to follow her hand, landing on the figure of Kaminari who was repeatedly walking into the window. Oh crap, I let go of him. Ashui cried. The power's gone? All Might asked the disheveled Aizawa as the younger teacher stood in the staff room doorway. Aizawa had arrived a few minutes ago, after not managing to find Nizu in his dorm. The principal had been in his office, getting up straight away to go and resolve the issue once he'd been found. Aizawa was grateful that for once someone knew what they were doing. Well, clearly not everywhere, he retorted, noting the bright lights, lit-up computer screens and working vending machine in the corner. He made a beeline for caffeine. Most of the students are lacking uniform for tomorrow and there's no heating, Aizawa continued. I got Todoroki to cover the fridge and freezer. What about young Kaminari? Yagi suggested. He's incapacitated. Oh dear, is he ill? Mentally, Aizawa muttered before he could catch himself. He overused his quirk, he spoke aloud. Ah, Yagi replied understandingly. Why are you still here? Aizawa asked, his back turned to the older man. I had some emails to finish off and I was reading an interesting article about Dash. Do you have 10 yen? Please. Yagi leant over his desk to hand Aizawa a coin, which the younger teacher placed in the vending machine. He drew out an iced coffee, downing half the bottle in one. Thank you, he replied as he placed the bottle down. Yagi was holding up a paper and smiling at his colleague. Let me enlighten you, the former pro smiled, a glint in his eye. Call it repayment for the yen. It'll only take a moment. Aizawa sighed. He didn't fancy owing All Might petty cash and he had to wait until Niza got back anyway. He was sure his kids would be fine. They were idiots but they weren't stupid. The awake, student body of Class 1A were stood around Bakugo's room nervously. Do we do it on a count of 3? Kirishima whispered into the silence. What exactly are we even doing on the count of 3? Jiro retorted. I still think heating up his room and siphoning off his sweat is the best shout, Shiro said. Siphoning off his sweat. Can you hear yourself? Yaoyorozu replied to the ridiculous suggestion. We could take his dirty laundry and use it as kindling, Hakagara suggested. That should be sweaty enough. There were a multitude of groans and outbursts of disgust thrown around the corridor, followed by shoos. Alas, it is in the wash, Aoyama whispered. And all of that is now, well, what? Ashido prompted. What's happened to our clothes? I think there's so much static electricity in them you may as well peel one item from another, he replied simply. Jiro flicked the complacent Kaminari. Can we send him in to get blasted already? I think if we just wake Kaken up and explain the situation, he'd be more than happy to dash. Midoriya stopped halfway through his sentence as he noticed the rest of the class looking at him, one eye raised. Forget I said anything, he finished quietly. Let's just decide, Azui commented, shivering. My tongue is getting dry. Send him in, Kirishima began to chant in a hushed voice. A few of the boys joined in, including Ashido and Jiro. And then what? Yaoyorozu hissed as Shiro began to open the boys' room. Who cares? Uraraka smiled at her, almost demonically. The rest of the class seemed to shrug, a lot of them getting out their cell phones and setting them to record. Yaoyorozu gave up. And so when the English ethologist, evolutionary biologist and author coined the word meme in his 1976 book The Selfish Game Dash, Aizawa looked up at the man who was once all might and questioned his own morals. The man had been reading off an article for the last 5 minutes, and what was worse was the coffee hadn't kicked in yet. It was used as a way of categorizing the way cultural information spreads. Aizawa mused, trying to sound as if he was at least listening. Oh, do you want to guess what this word could mean? Go on. Eat. Plan Wake Bakugo Up was going just as smoothly. As soon as Azui had let go of Kaminari, the boy had propelled himself into the side of Bakugo's wardrobe and was now repeatedly crashing against it. He's going to wake up, Jiro hissed. Bakugo can sleep through anything, Shiro replied. He wasn't even bothering to whisper anymore. Redirect him. Ashido cried to Azui, but the frog girl refused to move. It was Ida who eventually ran into the room himself and almost pushed Kaminari into Bakugo's bed. Kaminari himself ended up tripping over a loose wire on Bakugo's floor in the transit, and there was a brief moment you could have heard a pin drop before the teen came crashing down onto Bakugo's bed. Bakugo awoke with a scream, instinctively throwing his bed sheet over his attacker. What the fucking FFK? He yelled, his quirk coming into action, blasting explosions from his palms. Who the fuck dash? He, a monotone voice came from beneath the sheet. Bakugo poised himself before pulling off the cloth, ready to attack. Kaminari! What the dash? Jiro couldn't hold it any longer and burst out laughing, giving away the class's cover. What are you fuckers playing at? Yes. Shiro cried. Scare him to make him sweat. Who has a siphon? You fucking what? Bakugo hissed. Hi, Kaken, Midoriya stuttered, coming forward. Bakugo turned on his childhood friend instead, teeth bared. Don't you hi Kaken me, he snapped. This isn't a board meeting, we're in the same class. Thank you, Midoriya replied. Fuck off, came the compliment back. God, can someone get him restrained? Bakugo, you can't just restrain someone you find annoying. Ida yelled. I wasn't talking about damn Deku, I was talking about him. Bakugo replied, pointing to Kaminari, who was now bashing his legs against Bakugo's desk. Kaminari! Jiro called in dismay. Hey Azui, can you dash? Hagakura started but never got to finish as she turned to her classmate. Azui was standing just outside Bakugo's door, her eyes half shut, wavering slightly. Ribbit, she tried before her legs buckles. Shoji managed to grab her just before she hit the ground. You idiots, Bakugo commented as the class bundled into the living room with blankets. Shoji had lifted Azui to the sofas as soon as she'd fainted, and now the class were trying to warm her up. Todoroki was using his left side as a radiator beside her, and everyone else were piling duvets up on top of her. You know you couldn't have actually used my fucking sweat as fuel anyway. Why? Shiro asked. Because nitroglycerin is a damn explosive, you idiot. If you'd used that, it would have blown up the whole room. Just like the washing machines, Aoyama commented, earning a hit from Ishido beside him. I was there during the provisional licensing exam. I should have realized sooner, Yaoyorozu spoke up from the sofas. She was using her quirk to make candles in a futile attempt to raise the temperature of the room. Me too, Jiro added grimly from across the room. She should be fine though, as long as we keep her warm. She'll wake up soon. Her room has some kind of humidifier thing in it? Ojiro said as he came into the common area carrying an empty hot water bottle. It's not working because of the power cut though. Todoroki, if I fill a bowl with water, do you think you could use your quirk to heat it? Then we could use hot water bottles as well? Todoroki nodded, still concentrating hard on monitoring his quirk. Ojiro headed to the kitchen. Good thinking, Ojiro. Kirishima smiled, worried for his classmate. Azui looked peaceful enough, but her breathing had shallowed so much that there was a moment the class thought she might have died. It took Koda waking up and coming to see what all the screaming was to assure the group that she was fine. Did anyone contact Aizawa? His phone, Aoyama said, holding up a cell phone from the kitchen counter. He didn't take it? I'll go and find him, Ida cried, standing from where he was perched on the sofa Azui laid on. It is my duty as class rep. Where did he go in the end? Uraraka asked. I'm not sure, but I'd hazard a guess at the principal's dorms or office. I'll try the main building first, Ida replied, pushing his glasses up his face. Take my phone, Hakagura offered, handing it to the taller boy. It has a flashlight. You'll need it if the power's off in the rest of UA, and you can call us if you need backup. Thank you, Hakagura, I shall take good care of it, Ida replied as the second most sensible person headed out of the room. Is everyone awake now? Midoriya asked, peering round. Bakugu's screaming and the fast decreasing temperature of the dorm had been the last straw for the few students who'd managed to sleep through. Everyone was now littered about the common room, bundled up in blankets or coming in and out with extra duvets and pillows for Azui. I wish there was more I could do, Yaoyorozu complained as she generated another candle with her quirk. This feels stupid. If you had a mini barbecue, we could light that and make a proper fire, Uraraka suggested. With what though? Bakugu snapped. Something that can be used as kindling? I don't know, Ojiro replied, bringing a bowl of water beside Todoroki, the boy switching from heating up his surroundings to heating up the water. Oh, I know, Uraraka cried. Deku has loads of old boxes under his bed. How did you know that? Midoriya asked sheepishly. You always keep the boxes from the All Might merch you get? Well, it might be worth something one day. We could always use our clothes. I'm sure if you set a match alight near them, they'd poof. Straight into flames. Aoyama earned another slap from Ishido. Stop talking about our clothes like that. Ishido moaned. What happened to our clothes? Kita signed. You want to warm her up slowly anyway, you idiots, Bakugu interrupted. He's right, Koda signed, ceasing the argument. How did you know that? Kaminari asked his best friend. Frogs don't like sudden changes of temperature, obviously. Or she wouldn't have crashed out in the first place, Bakugu replied, yawning. What is the temperature? Jiro piped up. I don't know, but I do know that if you breath out hard enough, then you can see your breath. Ishido smiled, demonstrating with a puff. It was cold. Shit, Todoroki suddenly said, looking around. Where's Kaminari? There was a moment of panic as the class whipped their heads round the room before. It's okay, Jiro called. I trapped him. The class looked over to see Kaminari stood in the middle of 4 chairs Jiro had placed back to back in order to stunt his movements. The teen was no longer walking around aimlessly, however, just pulsing his arms back and forward, thumbs up. I think he's recharging, she commented. Thank God, Bakugu snarled. He's going to be in for it when he comes round. Yaoyorozu? Uraraka asked, standing up and coming to sit beside her friend. Yaoyorozu replied, concentrating hard on her quirk. I know you said earlier that we could borrow some of your clothes. Do you mind if I have a look for a jumper or something? Yaoyorozu looked across at her friend who was shivering underneath the layers she already had on. Uraraka's clothes were nice, but they were cheaply made and thin because of it. Yaoyorozu knew that her own jumpers would be much warmer. Sure, she smiled back. Thank you, and with that she jumped up. Yaoyorozu, can I have a look as well? Jiro asked shyly. Of course, you all can, she replied. A handful of thank yous came back and she blushed, letting her hair float forwards to cover her face. It didn't take long before the group came back with an armful of clothes. Sorry if we went overboard a little, Uraraka cried as she placed them onto an empty chair. We'll put them all back. Aoyama gasped as he held up a gray woolen polo neck, placing it against him. Real cashmere he asked. It's so chic. Oh, I forgot I even had that, Yaoyorozu admitted. Uraraka was wrapping a blue scarf around her neck and Jiro pulling a deathband's hoodie over her head. I didn't know you liked this kind of stuff, she admitted. I had a goth phase, Yaoyorozu replied. Didn't we all? Midoriya commented. The majority of the class turned to stare at him. Guys, Todoroki broke the silence, a hot water bottle in hand. She's waking up. The clothes were abandoned as the class rushed over to the sofa where Azui was turning softly. There was a moment and then her eyes slid open, a yawn escaping her mouth. Ribbit, she said quietly as she came to. Azui, Ojiro cried. You're okay? We were worried. Kaminari admitted with a beam. How are you feeling? Hakagura asked as Yaoyorozu pulled a stray bit of hair from her face. Tired, she muttered slowly. We should try and keep her awake now, Koda recommended. How? Midoriya asked. I've got it. Aoyama smiled, holding up a green beret from the chair. Yagi was trying to get Aizawa to watch Vines. Oh. They're all in English, and besides, if it's not a cat video or a hair tutorial, I'm not interested. There was a stare. Forget I said that, the pro muttered. Just one video. I know a good one. No, just come here. Guff. You won't regret it. Yagi, I swear to dash. Ow. Luckily the two were interrupted by Ida crashing through the door. Ida, Aizawa said as the boy stopped in the doorway. Aizawa-sensei, it's Azui, she's gone into hibernation. The teenager breathed, out of breath from the cold. He stopped, cocking his head to one side at the sight of his teachers. All Might was in the process of dragging Aizawa down to see his monitor with the use of his scarf, the latter protesting by pressing a hand to Yagi's face. Are you okay? He asked unsurely. Aizawa stood up straight, grabbing his. My phone, he muttered. You left it behind, Ida said. Crap. Okay, let's go, he said quickly, worried for his student. Yagi stood up beside him. I'll come as well, he offered. I'm sorry for keeping your teacher from you, he apologized. It isn't an issue, Ida cried back. The rest of the class have got it covered. Aizawa nodded grimly. He was angry at himself for not thinking about the heating sooner. If anything happened to Azui, Nizu had better work out the power shortage quickly. Work it, Uraraka-chan. Class 1A were having far more fun than their teachers. Aoyama had decided that the best way to keep Azui awake and everyone warm would be to have a fashion show with Yaoyorozu's spare clothes. Uraraka was currently wearing a beanie as a shoe, a cardigan wrapped around her waist, and 3 jumpers, strutting down the corridor in front of her classmates. The rest of 1A were sitting around cheering. Azui was sat up, supported by Kirishima behind her. Bakugo had tried to leave as soon as the fashion show had started, but Kirishima had grabbed his wrist to stop him. Bakugo had stood seething ever since. Kirishima hadn't let go of his wrist and Bakugo hadn't asked him to. Koda's go! Aoyama cried, the latter protesting wildly. With his arms. The blonde-haired boy still managed to shove him in an oversized coat, however. We'll do it together, he winked at his classmate, grabbing his hand. Koda smiled nervously back at him. The cheers from the class were second to none though. How are you feeling, Azui? Yaoyorozu asked her friend. Cold, ribbit, Azui replied, hugging the covers to her. Do you think it'd be safe to make that barbecue fire now? Kirishima asked Yaoyorozu. I need food first, she replied, looking up at the boy. I've been using my all evening. But after, of course, if Koda thinks that's okay. Koda nodded enthusiastically, happy the attention was away from his catwalk. I'll go grab something to eat, Yaoyorozu started when she felt a hand on her shoulder. I'll get it, Todoroki said, getting up shakily. I need a break anyway, sorry Azui. Both teenagers had been overusing their quirks. Okay, we need kindling, Kirishima cried, lifting his arms and letting go of Bakugo in the process. The explosive teen was startled by the sudden movement but crossed his arms and looked away, pouting. Deku, you got the boxes? Uraraka asked as she peeled off a jumper. Yeah, of course, he smiled, darting off. Jiros, go. You legend, Midoriya, Kirishima shouted after him. They're only boxes, Bakugo muttered. Come on Bakugo, they mean something to him and we're all worried about Azui. Kirishima paused before breaking into a smile. Just because you're jealous? You what dash? Bakugo started. Kirishima felt a pillow to the back of his head. Fuck off. Okay, I think I can do it, Yaoyorozu said, her mouth full with the toast her and Todoroki were sharing. The class turned from where they were watching Jiro to watch Yaoyorozu as she concentrated on producing the latest object. Midoriya came back in the room as she was finishing up. You took your time, Bakugo commented. Oh sorry, I was trying to find the more common models, he admitted. Ribbit. I appreciate this, Azui smiled from Kirishima's lap. It's no problem, sorry it's so small, Yaoyorozu breathed as she leant against the sofa, worn out. In front of her was a small red bucket barbecue. Right? I'll fill it up, Midoriya offered as both him and Ojiro loaded the All Might merch into the bucket. Ready? Todoroki asked as he inched forward, readying his quirk. Yep, Ojiro replied, sitting back. Aizawa, Ida and Yagi exited the lift swiftly as they got up to the dorm, Aizawa crossing the two, bursting into the common area. It was too quiet. As the two teachers entered the room they looked around at the sight before them. Kaminari was tucked around 4 chairs, eyes wondering. Aoyama, Jiro, Uraraka and Koda were covered in someone's clothes. There were candles everywhere and Midoriya, Yaoyorozu and Todoroki were making a barbecue. Azui was sitting up, exhausted but awake. Aizawa sighed in relief at that. The rest? Made his head hurt. Even Ida looked confused as he watched on. None of the students had noticed the trio yet, they were all watching Todoroki. The teen was creating a small flame in his palm, lowering it into the barbecue. There was a flicker as the flame tried to catch onto the boxes. Come on, Midoriya breathed. Burn, All Might burn, burn. Young Midoriya? Midoriya paled. The boxes caught alight. All Might? The TV suddenly came back into life, the fridge beeping and the heating whirring on. The power was back on. Aizawa took a seat at an empty table in the restaurant and relaxed into the chair. He was the first to arrive. Mick's birthday had passed on the Tuesday and now a load of the UA staff members were going out for a celebratory meal. Staff members. He should probably refer to them as friends. He was halfway though peering down the incredibly posh-looking menu when a waiter came up in front of him, shuffling from foot to foot. What would you like to order? A low voice muttered. Aizawa looked up, confused. He recognized that voice. And there, in full waiter's uniform, looking red with embarrassment, was Shinso. There was a moment the two stared at each other before Aizawa looked back down at the menu again. You shouldn't be working here, he said softly as he scrolled through the coffee selection. UA has rules on this sort of thing. It's too dangerous. Sorry, sensei, came the almost annoyed reply. I'll take a black coffee, Aizawa finally looked up. And you can't call me sensei here. Nothing more, sir? Shinso replied, clearly uncomfortable with the new honorific. No, I'll wait until the others turn up. Others? Now Shinso really had paled. Well, this wouldn't be Mick's birthday meal without the rest of the faculty members now, would it? Aizawa smiled sweetly up at the boy. When do you finish? Close, came the small voice. Good luck. Aizawa smirked before noticing how Shinso was really shaking at this point. He sighed. Don't worry. I'll make sure you don't get into any trouble, he assured his student. I'm sorry, sensei, sir, Shinso replied, starting to turn before stopping. I just need it for my family. The money, that is. The boy turned back, facing Aizawa, swapping his notebook from one hand to the other. I get the rule about not working for the hero course, because it's dangerous to be in the public eye, but I'm not in the hero course. But you were in the final rounds of the sports festival and you will be in the hero course one day, Aizawa explained, patiently watching the boy's mouth curl up into a small smile he immediately tried to hide. If your family are having financial trouble, you can talk to anyone at UA, okay? But this? You need to be more smart, kid. This is Tokyo? Yes, sir, Shinso replied bashfully. Table 3 want you, Aizawa pointed before the conversation could any more soppy. Black coffee, he reminded. On it, Shinso scribbled down before moving to the table along. As he took the order of the couple on table 3, he noticed the slight shake in his hand and looked back at his teacher nervously. He was grateful for Aizawa, more so than any adult he'd ever met. He wouldn't mind quitting the waitressing job as it was. It was only 6:30 in the evening, but after a week of school and then more training with Aizawa, he was shattered. As he took the order and made his way to the back, he noticed the door open and heard a familiar voice blaring through. Shota, you're here. Present Mike called as he made a beeline for the table. Of course, Aizawa replied in his usual monotone. You're my best friend. WWWWC. I told you, Namuri, we didn't have to wait outside dash. You waited outside? Shinso didn't hear the rest of the conversation as he finished inputting the order into the machine and started grinding coffee beans, the coffee machine drowning his teacher's conversation out. He took a long breath. This couldn't go too badly, could it? 20 minutes and 2 rounds of drink orders later, Shinso was carrying a precarious tray of sake back to the table. It was clear Aizawa had already warned them of his job because apart from Snipe giving him a small, wide-eyed look, his teachers had acted as if everything was normal, meaning Shinso could relax. It was almost fun to see them outside of UA. Hey Shinso! Just leave the drinks in the middle, Mike cried as he approached them. We all ordered the same thing, right? No, I ordered coffee, Aizawa corrected, taking the only coffee cup off of the tray. You're not drinking? Mike asked in surprise. I'm offended. No, I'm not, Aizawa replied, taking a sip of the black liquid. Why does that offend you? You food will be with you shortly, Shinso said quietly, not wanting to interrupt his teacher's conversations. As he collected Aizawa's last coffee cup, he turned back and realized his manager was following him. His manager, Ito, was a kind guy, but it was apparent when he put business first. Today was one of those days. Do you realize who those people are? He hissed as Shinso typed out a bill for table 8. I think so, he lied. He knew he wasn't meant to work whilst attending UA, so he'd never said he went to hero school, instead lying on his form that he went to the high school in the next prefecture. It meant that he didn't have to tell anyone that he went to a hero school but wasn't on the hero course as well. That was the worst thing about attending UA. They're all pro heroes, Ito replied. Big business, yeah? So you going over there and not even communicating with them? Not bothering to hand out their drinks? They told me to leave them dash, Shinso started to protest. It doesn't look good, yeah? Ito interrupted. You need to work harder, Shinso, or I'll give the table to someone else and you can forget doing overtime over the holidays. Okay? Yes, senpai, Shinso replied, taking the card machine away to table 8. 2 hours later, and it was becoming apparent to Shinso that not only was he going to see his teachers outside of class, he was going to see them drunk. Sing it to me. Sing in English, Mike cried, dragging his hands so they landed on Aizawa's shoulders, looking up at the man who was rolling his eyes. It was about 9 in the evening and the place was starting to file out. Around the teacher's table, plates and bowls were scattered, broken up only by the wrapping paper from Present Mick's many birthday gifts. The pro was wearing new headphones over his old ones, getting everyone to try on his new pairs of glasses, and had wrapped a scarf around Aizawa's neck. I don't know how happy birthday goes in English, Aizawa replied, trying to drag the man off of him but getting tangled up in said scarf as he did. Shinso picked a few empty plates up and was about to walk away from the table once more when he caught Ito giving him a rather pointed look from the other side of the room. Shinso sighed and turned back. I know how it goes, he offered shyly. And the entire teaching faculty of UA turned to stare at him. You do? All might boomed from the other end of the table, his voice surprisingly loud still, considering the stature of the man. Well, you must start us off, young Shinso. Here, stand on my seat, he cried as he began to get up. Oh, I don't think that's really dash. Oh, go on. Midnight cooed from beside him. It'll be so cute. And don't worry, we'll all join in. Won't we? Leave the boy alone, Aizawa said, placing his arm between his student and the hero. "No, please Shinso, go ahead," Snipe laughed gruffly. Shinso looked over and gave his homeroom teacher a grimace. "He'd better not bring this up in class." "Well, I can. I'm not allowed to stand on the chair, thank you though." He paused, knowing that All Might wouldn't want him to announce his presence. "Call me Yagi." He smiled with a wink. Shinso bowed his head in reply. "Sing to me," Mike called gleefully. "If you wanted to sing, why didn't we just go to a karaoke?" Aizawa muttered. But Shinso placed his notepad back in his apron pocket, coughing gently before beginning to sing what little of "Happy Birthday" he really knew. "Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Dash." "Hizashi," the table cried as they all joined into the foreign song. Shinso was happy to quieten after this, letting his teachers sing them out. Present Mike looked as if he was about to cry, swaying from side to side with the music, his glass in the air and very purposely bumping into Aizawa's shoulder as he did. Aizawa gave Shinso a look as if he wanted the ground to eat him up, and Shinso smirked in reply. At least it looked like they'd leave soon. They didn't. Another hour later and the whole restaurant was empty apart from the teachers. Ito was loving it. He kept on reminding what few staff there was left, getting them to buy as many drinks as possible until close. Shinso didn't think they needed any more drinks. Hey everybody," Mike cried, so loudly that Shinso could hear it from where he was washing up. "Let's take a picture, yeah." "Go," Ito commanded, coming up beside Shinso. "Senpai?" Shinso asked. "I don't know why, but they seem to like you, kid. So go out there and help take their picture or something," he prompted in reply. "Try and suggest they get some more sake to cheers with as well." Shinso rolled his eyes as he wiped his hands on the towel. Ito didn't see luckily, and the teenager made his way out to the front. The group had stood up and was drunkenly making a crowd just past the table. "Did you want me to dash?" he started. "Shinsu, get in this photo," Mike called when he saw the boy. "Oh, I was just going to offer to, whoa dash." Midnight had dragged him into the group, holding him far too close for comfort. Shinso tried to move away, but her grip was too strong. He was stuck in the middle of his drunk teachers. "Who's going to take the photo now?" Power Loader jeered somewhere near the back. Shinso couldn't see, Midnight's boob was in the way. "Hey, why can't you dash?" Aizawa began to argue back. Shinso lost the rest, being pulled towards Midnight and Mike instead. "Hey Shinso, what's Aizawa like as a teacher?" Midnight asked in a stage whisper. "Have you ever seen him smile?" "Well, no dash," Shinso started to reply. "Do you know his ticklish spots though?" Mike screamed, causing Shinso to cover his ears. The teen shook his head. Mike turned to where Aizawa was still arguing with Power Loader and grabbed him by his now exposed neck. "What the fuck?" Aizawa screamed before collapsing into himself, producing noises that sounded less like a laugh and more like a cat being strangled and then cut into pieces. "Ha ha 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 dash. Hizashi. Take notes." Snipe laughed, slapping Shinso on the back so hard that for once he was grateful that he was tucked underneath Midnight's arm. "Could we use this?" All Might piped up. "I brought it because I saw it on TV." He was holding up a selfie stick. "Why?" Mike yelled, letting go of Aizawa, who nearly fell on the floor. "Hizashi, your quirk," he laughed bitterly. "You're an arsehole? And that's why you love me," Mike replied, skipping back to Aizawa and grabbing his face, kissing him. Shinso's mouth dropped wide open. "This is typical for them," Midnight explained, laughing at the student's face. "What you just saw," Aizawa hissed in Shinso's direction, reminding the teen that he at least was still very much not drunk. "Yes, sensei," Shinso nodded with a smirk. "You should see them when they're both drunk," Midnight continued to whisper. "Everybody get in." All Might, or should Shinso refer him as Yagi now, called from the front of the group. "Now how do you work this thing?" he muttered, taking about 15 selfies as he did. "Who wants to move to a bar?" Mike jeered as the rest of the teachers cried in agreement. "Do you remember what happened the last time we went to a bar?" Ectoplasm cried, causing the group to explode into fits of giggles. "Yes. Let's do that again," Power Loader called. "Clothes swap, clothes swap, clothes swap." Mike began to chant. I have the pictures from last year, Midnight grinned. Do you want to see? Shinso was half tempted to say yes when Aizawa came between the pair. Could we have the bill please? He asked pointedly. Oh yes of course, sorry sensei, I mean sir, Shinso stuttered. The meal was prepaid right? So it's just the 6 rounds of sake and the 7 black coffees you need to pay for? That's fine, Aizawa replied, relieving the boy from Midnight's grasp. Shinso hurried off to the back and plugged the order into the machine. Ito came up beside him with a tea towel. Yen 55200? He beamed over Shinso's shoulder. And just on drinks as well. Let me finish up this order. There's a lot of washing up to do. Brilliant. It was another half an hour before Shinso finished up. He sighed as he finally hung his apron up and grabbed his shoes out of the locker. He yawned as he locked up the back and wandered around the front to make sure the coffee machines were off when Ito stopped him, his hand out. Senpai, he asked curiously, placing the keys in his manager's hand. Go home Shinso, there's a man out front, your dad? He says he's here to pick you up. Thank you senpai, Shinso stuttered, confused as he made his way through the tables. His parents lived too far away to be picking him up, it was the weekend now so he just planned on getting the train home. So who dash? Aizawa was stood, a silhouette in the darkened restaurant. He turned as he spotted his student. Aizawa-sensei? Shinso asked. What are you? Come on kid, Aizawa replied, beckoning him over with his hand. Shinso fell into pace beside him as the two left the building, Shinso sticking close to Aizawa's side. I'm taking you home. I live a while away sensei, you don't have to, Shinso explained as they walked in the direction of the station. Why do you think I stuck to coffee? The pro asked nonchalantly. Shinso looked down so his teacher couldn't see his eyes water as the two entered the dimly lit station together. One day he was going to be someone's hero as well. Just like Aizawa. So sensei dash. Talk about this evening again and you're dead. Yes sensei. Does Aizawa sleep? Ashido asked absent-mindedly. The Baku squad of Kaminari, Shiro, Ashido and Bakugu were sat around the TV playing Mario Kart of Kaminari's Nintendo Switch. You fucking kidding me? Of course he sleeps. Literally in every homeroom, Shiro retorted as he took a sharp right, passing Bakugu in the process. Fuck you. That's not sleeping though, those are naps, Ashido replied, rolling her eyes. I mean does he like full-on sleep? Yeah. He must do. But when? I don't know on his day off? Holidays? Kaminari piped up, not tearing his eyes from the screen. Do pro heroes get holidays? Shiro asked. From patrol duty yeah, not from being on call. But pro heroes are always on call, Ashido pointed out. Holy shit. You can still sleep and be on call. Bakugu hissed from the corner of the sofa, his controller one wrong move away from being thrown across the room. I guess. Nah, I sleep through my phone going off, Shiro grinned. What are you going to do when you're on call then? Stay up? Bakugu replied. Probably. But what if you're on call for like a week? Dude you'd die, Ashido giggled. Other people would die more like, Kaminari commented as he threw a banana. Nah, I'd do something about it, Shiro said, relaxing back into the cushions as he cruised past Bakugu. Fuck OFF. Like what? Ashido asked, ignoring the screams of her best friend beside her. Dunno, I'll get a coffee drip in my arm. A coffee drip? No wait. I'll get Kaminari to shock me awake. Nah, Kaminari replied, wiping his controller off with his t-shirt, passing the finish line. There was a general hush as Aizawa entered the common area, flicking on the kettle and settling himself beside Ida and Todoroki who were working on the kitchen table. You get so into this game, Ashido commented, passing the finishing line herself. Pays off though, Kaminari smirked. Ugh, maybe it's my character, Ashido sighed. Yoshi is useless. Why do you choose him then? Because he's cute? Hey Kirishima. Shiro called as the red-haired boy entered the room. Do you want to play? Kirishima offered. It's okay, me and Bakugu are going to train, Kaminari replied, flexing his hands and wandering behind Bakugu. Really? Sick? Yeah, after this cup is over, Bakugu said, batting Kirishima's hand away so he could concentrate. Yeah. Kirishima replied to Kaminari, igniting Bakugu's protests. I'm going to lie on the ground and activate my full hardening and Bakugu's going to drop bricks on me. Kirishima no. Aizawa suddenly called as he threw a stray coffee filter in the bin. But dash. No. What if I dash? No. Sensei. Why not? Aizawa-sensei, when do you sleep? Ashido cut in, turning around and leaning with her knees up on the sofa to see her teacher. Why do you want to know that? Aizawa asked. There was a pause, a sigh. When I can, where I can. Do you ever nap on call? Never. But you nap in class, Shiro pointed out. Because you don't need a homeroom teacher. No true hero does, Aizawa replied tiredly. You need a mentor and someone to tell you when you're being stupid, but that's it. And don't worry, I'll make sure you know when you're being stupid. Kirishima? What? And with that he left the room, a coffee in hand. Was that, in a really backhanded way, a compliment? Ashido asked with a giggle. Well, you have seen his expulsion rate, right? Kaminari replied. But he is a homeroom teacher. That's his job, Ida suddenly piped up from the table. He's a crap homeroom teacher though. Shiro. No, hear me out. Shiro protested. Choose a map first, idiot, Bakugu snapped. Not Rainbow Road, he added as an afterthought. Fine. Moo Moo Meadows. Basic, Ashido smirked. Shut up. Let me tell you my point. Right, so he keeps any explanations to a minimum before letting us figure it out. He never gets involved with school stuff like the class rep and the cultural festival, and if we fail something important, the only punishment he ever gives is like the threat of expulsion. No, but he's always there if we have a problem or need extra training. He'll do more for us than any other homeroom teacher I've ever met, Ashido pointed out. Fucking hell, Ashido, now you're missing my point. How you just got hit by a cow, she laughed in response as Shiro leaned over to try and hit her with a cushion. Fuck off. Fine, finish your point. He does everything but his actual role as homeroom teacher, Shiro continued, leaning back into his seat. So like he puts all the effort into making sure we're mentally okay and shit, but that's not his job description. Like grades and shit. I've been scraping. But you've had to do extra work, Kirishima piped up. Aha, but that's a school requirement, not an Aizawa requirement. Exactly. He doesn't care as long as you've got the important stuff down, Ashido smiled. Ashido, you weren't even on my side a second ago. Nah, I just like winding you up. What's this got to do with his sleeping again? I don't know. Wouldn't it be cool to do an internship with Aizawa though? Kaminari asked aloud. It'd be hell. I like my complexion too much. Yeah, you look bad enough without bags under your eyes, Shiro, Kirishima smirked. Keep your eyes on the road. I'm finished. You get, Bakugu suddenly cried. How? Ida, don't you find it weird that your teachers are nearly the same age as your brother? Ashido called across to the two boys. I haven't really thought about it, Ida replied. I find it weird, Todoroki suddenly spoke up, putting his book down a little. Oh yeah, how old's your sister Todoroki? Only 22. So still 9 years younger than Aizawa. But she's like your mum, right? Ashido asked. I mean, I guess. Okay, that must feel less weird. You can't say that shit. Shiro hissed at her. I'm getting to know my classmates. It's nearly been a year. I'd rather people ask me straight than just pretend nothing happened, Todoroki shrugged. There you go. But I'd also rather people didn't ask, he finished before looking down at his book. Ashido paled a little as Kaminari mouthed, you fucked up at her with a grin. When does Mike sleep? Kaminari asked, changing the conversation. When he's not on call. And teaching. And doing his radio show. Oh, and running the English department, Ashido piped up again. How did that happen? Did he get a teaching degree as well? Shiro asked. Nah, he just went to England for a month, Bakugu smirked. Really? No, fucking hell, I don't know. That would be sick, Ashido cried. It would be unprofessional, Ida's voice called from the table. Stop listening to our conversation, Four Eyes. You're loud and this table is only a meter away. It's impossible not to listen, Ida replied to the explosive teen. You also suck at games? Fuck off. It was that map, Bakugu hissed as he crossed the finish line in 8th. Fine. I'm choosing Yoshi Falls, Ashido said, clicking on the joystick. How do you define how good a map is or not? Zero laughed at Bakugo. Depends what place I come. Egotistical shit, Kirishima commented. Bring it to the battlefield, I'll take any of you out. I'm okay without validating you, thanks. Kirishima continued as he raced past Bakugo's false start. I wish someone would take me out, Ashido sighed, once again ignoring the conversation around her. On a date? Zero asked. Hold on, I'll grab Deku and get him to use his damn quirk on. Take you both out, Bakugo grinned. Ha! 2 birds, 1 stone. Wait, what? Ashido cried. Bakugo, you love my company and don't you even deny it? Fuck off. See, I thought you were going to train? Zero asked. This is training, Bakugo hissed as he fell off the bridge. Besides, I only really wanted to drop bricks on Kirishima. Bro, I'm joking, stop getting your knickers in a twist. Or should I say boxers? Bakugo laughed, turning and expertly grabbing the band of Kirishima's jogging pants with one hand. Sorry, not manly enough for you, he gasped through gritted teeth as he attempted to give his best friend a wedgie. You're such an idiot, Kirishima cried as he attempted to set himself free. Ha, I know. Instead of Bakugo, how about Bakugo? Ashido laughed. You son of a dash. Bakugo, Kirishima whined from behind him. Fine, you needy piece of shit. Let me finish off this round and I'll come out with you. We'll do a circuit, okay? Can I join? Todoroki called. Can we fight? Bakugo asked as the younger teen nodded. Then yeah. You can't fight on school grounds without permission, Ida reminded them. Okay, you can join our circuit if you're an obstacle, Bakugo replied, Todoroki shrugging as he placed a bookmark in his chapter. Todoroki, you shouldn't let them control you like that, Ida cried from beside him. No, it's okay. I find it funny that they assume they'll get past me, Todoroki replied. You little dash. Bakugo, you have a fucking blue shell, use it? Kaminari cried in annoyance. Kaminari, you're in first. Not for the blue team. Wait, since when were there teams? Bakugo snapped. Since round 1, idiot. I don't want to hit Ashido though, I want to hit Kaminari, he hissed. Why? Because he's in first. But he's on your team. I fucking hate teams. Also, Bakugo, you're 11th? I'm fucking what? So, Ashido, why wouldn't you want to go out with Midoriya? Kaminari asked. What? Just a question, seeing as you laughed at the suggestion earlier. Well, I don't know. Ashido pondered, turning red. He likes Uraraka? Correction, Todoroki spike up. Uraraka likes Midoriya. I don't know who Midoriya likes. Uraraka likes Midoriya? In what way? Ida asked in surprise. Use your imagination, dickhead, Bakugo rolled his eyes. Midoriya likes All Might and his mom. Bakugo! What? It's fucking true. Bakugo, use your bullet already. Zero groaned. Why? Because we've all passed the finish line apart from you? What? Bakugo yelled, shoving his controller into the pillow beside him. Oh fuck this, come on Kirishima, as he turned. Todoroki got up as well. Oh yeah, you're coming too? Laters, Kirishima smiled as the three left the room. Have fun. Ashido called back. Can someone get Bakugo over the finish line? Kaminari asked as he turned to the kitchen. Ida, did you want to play? What game are you playing? Ida asked, tilting his glasses. Mario Kart? Yes, please, although I have to warn you, I'm surprisingly good at this one. He smiled as he took his seat next to Ashido. Yes, Ida, she grinned at him. You can try and beat our reigning champion. Zero nodded in the direction of Kaminari. I will try my hardest, Ida replied as the round restarted. Do you fancy anyone, Ida? Ashido asked as they set off. Well, I don't think it's very professional for pro heroes to date other pros. Personally, I think I'd be too scared for their well-being to be able to be in a relationship. So you do fancy someone? How would one know? Fuck, I don't know. You like their company and it makes you sad when they leave? You want to touch their dash? Shut up, Zero, I swear. I don't think I completely understand, Ida replied. I was getting somewhere with that. Ashido cried at Zero, who was still giggling. I should probably make you aware, I am still here, Ida commented, throwing a red shell. Idiot, Kaminari hissed at Ishido once more. Oh shit, I haven't done the English homework, Shiro suddenly cried as he took a sharp turn. I'll do in the break before class tomorrow. It's an essay, Ida cried. Oh yeah, Shiro trailed off before, yeah, I'll manage it. You make me scared, Ida said. Which character am I again? Bowser, Ishido replied. Wait, what? Sorry, I didn't know. But you're in third. How are you in third when you didn't even know who you were playing as? I have a knack. Jesus Christ, how have we not known this before? You assumed from my outer appearance that I was not that type of person. Ida, no offense, Shiro started. Of course. But yeah. Not enough for second yet though. Kaminari cried as he shot past the finish line. Yes, Kaminari, you are a formidable opponent, Ida agreed as he followed moments behind him. To be fair, I have never played on a Nintendo Switch before. Wow. I love you, Ishido beamed. But me being good at games. Is that a trait I should have if I'm trying to get someone to like me? Ida continued. So you do like someone? I never said that. Depends what kind of person you want to like you, but yeah, I'd say gaming is a plus. I'd like it if a girl I was with played games. Shiro grinned at his classmate. Fair enough. I'll bear it in mind. No. Who do you like? Ishido cried. Ishido, stop pestering him and get your butt into gear. You're letting the team down here, Kaminari said, pointing at the screen. I've got half a lap to catch up. Usually I just assume girls don't like me, Shiro shrugged. Shiro, no. No, it's fine, I don't mind. Well, I do, but being a hero is way more important. Hey. How did you catch me at the last second? 4th place. Ishido yelled in victory. And from 7th. Right, I'm getting a snack. Who else wants one? She smiled as she bounded over to the kitchen. Depends what you're getting, Shiro replied. I don't know. Oh, there's pears. She smillies studying the packaging. Oh, they're ripe and ready. Ready for what though? Kaminari winked. Consumption, I presume, Ida replied. Ida, you're amazing. Thank you. Seriously though, does anyone else want a pear? Ishido asked again. Nah, I'm good, Shiro replied. Toss one over, Kaminari called, raising one hand. Ishido's throw was low though and the fruit slammed into the back of the sofa instead. Actually throw it then, Kaminari joked. Catch it then, she retorted. Piss off then. Fuck off then. Kaminari. Ishido. Ha, it's just banta, don't worry Ida. Kaminari smiled as he reached round to retrieve the snack. Alright, I've chosen cheap beach. Last round, isn't it? Throw us. Yeah. Last chance to beat Kaminari, Ida. I intend on it, Ida replied. You can fucking try, Kaminari grinned, before realizing. Sorry Ida. No, it's okay. It's banta. Of course. Always dude. Okay, we ready? Shiro asked as he selected Luigi's mansion. Hell yeah. Ishido cried and the teens pressed. There was a flurry of movement as the 4 set off. Kaminari instantly took the lead, but Ida was on his tail. Kaminari slid a banana behind him, catching the boy out as they entered the 2nd lap. You dash. Ida started. Oh my god, Ida nearly swore. Ishido giggled as she passed Shiro in 5th. Kaminari kept his lead until the very last stretch. I have a blue shell. Shiro cried moments away from the finish line. Who would you get out? Ishido asked quickly. Ah, sorry man, Shiro smiled as he released it. There was a moment as it passed Ida, before circling and crashing into Kaminari. Game over. No. What the fuck? Kaminari yelled as Ida placed his controller down proudly. It's okay, he smiled, pushing his glasses back up where they'd fallen. You're still first overall? Ida, your glasses were really low. Could you even see the screen? Ishido asked. No. Not really, Ida replied as Ishido's mouth dropped. Kaminari was about to protest again when the door slammed open, revealing Bakugo. Do you know where Aizawa is? He barked. The teenagers looked around at each other. In his room, I think, Ishido replied. Why? Did you drop a brick on Kirishima? Shiro asked jokingly. Not exactly, Bakugo hissed. What did you drop on Kirishima? Kaminari asked seriously. Right, it's not my fucking fault, okay? He said he wanted to be an obstacle. What? Who? Shiro asked confused. Todoroki. What did you do, Bakugo? Ida said quickly. Did you drop Todoroki on Kirishima? Ashido cried. What are you? An idiot? Bakugo snapped. No, it was an accident. Bakugo. We set him on fire. Class 1A knew that something was up with their homeroom teacher from the moment he walked into first period. The pro clearly hadn't gotten any sleep, the bags under his eyes a sinful shade of black, although maybe that was just in contrast to his exceedingly pale skin. Goosebumps trickled along his cheeks and his hair, usually and surprisingly well kept, was slick against his forehead. He just looked awful. The class slowly but skillfully turned to look at one another, sharing the same look of confusion, before watching as Aizawa shakily set his papers down. Jiro craned her neck to look at Midoriya, mouthing, "Do you think he's okay?" Midoriya shrugged back, shaking his head slightly. Ida pushed his glasses further up his face, Uraraka sitting up a little to see past him. Bakugo still had his head resting on his arms, but even he raised an eye. The whole class was waiting in muted silence. What? Came the familiar growl from the front of the room. I can feel you all staring. Every student pretended that there was something fascinating on the desk in front of them. Aizawa sighed. Although, at this point it was more of a groan. Let's begin, he snapped and cautiously homeroom began. 10 minutes into homeroom and things took a turn for the worse. The class had been handed worksheets and told gruffly to get on with it before Aizawa had placed himself at his desk. He'd paled increasingly, beads of sweat appearing at his forehead. And he was fidgeting. His hands wiping at his jeans, then pulling at his collar. The constant moving was attracting the attention and worry of his 20 students. Midoriya watched this unfold from the back of the class. Something was up with his homeroom teacher. If previous experience was anything to go on, Aizawa looked as if he was going to be sick. Trying to catch the attention of Todoroki just behind him, he noticed that he wasn't the only one coming to the same conclusion, the whole class seemingly on edge. As if on cue, Aizawa stood up with a start, his chair squealing against the floor, the entirety of 1A looking up. Aizawa hadn't noticed. The man had gone a deathly shade of white, moving quickly to the door, hand over his mouth, swinging around the door frame to break into a run. There was silence, a couple of papers falling off the desk with a clatter. Do you think he's gone to be sick? Uraraka asked slowly. I hope not, Yaoyorozu replied worriedly, the class beginning to fidget in their seats. Should someone go after him? Kirishima suggested awkwardly. We don't know where he's gone, Todoroki pointed out. Besides, Ida interrupted. We don't know if he really is sick. He could have just been called out of the room. There was a small pause. Although, that seems extremely unlikely, Ida finished with a sigh. What do we do then? Jiro asked the room. We should just carry on with our work, Azui piped up. Not cause any more fuss for sensei. Good idea, Azui, Ida cried. I have finished the sheet, however. Do mine for me then, Kaminari grinned, flying his paper airplane of a worksheet in Ida's direction. It hit Koda on the head instead. Oh shit. Sorry, he cried, Azui reaching across with her tongue to flick him around the head. Koda signed idiot, and there was a moment of shock before the class erupted into giggles. It was rare to see Koda become sarcastic, but the more and more he'd become comfortable with his classmates, the more and more he'd picked up on their mannerisms. As the class were still laughing, Aizawa returned. Shoji noticed him first, sending Ashido a look, who then tugged on Kaminari's shirt. This went on until the class had returned to silence. They started at their homeroom teacher as he sat, crumpled, to his seat. He hadn't even bothered to tell them off for talking. He looks paler, Koda signed to Todoroki from under his seat. Agreed, Todoroki signed back. He paused for a moment before tearing off a corner of his worksheet and scribbling down a note. He passed the crumpled piece of paper across to Koda and signed instructions. Give this to Azui. Koda did, and Azui took it discreetly with her tongue, unfolding it in her lap. The rest of the class kept on glancing her way, trying not to catch the attention of their sick teacher. Find a way to take his temperature. Thumbs up for hot, thumbs down for cold. Azui gave Todoroki a pointed look of, "Why me?" Todoroki shrugged and she was about to write out a reply when she noticed the glances. Sighing, she tentatively raised her hand. Aizawa looked up wearily. "Azui?" he croaked. Can I ask you a question, sensei?" she asked awkwardly, taken aback by the weak tone in her teacher's voice. Aizawa beckoned her over and she got up, her seat scraping awkwardly behind her. She could feel 19 pairs of eyes on her as she approached her teacher, honing her senses to try and figure out his body temperature. She didn't need to hone in much. She gave Todoroki a quick thumbs up before placing her worksheet in front of her teacher. "Can you check it over for me?" she asked quickly, feeling cool air brushing past her bare legs. Aizawa shivered, his teeth clenching as he gripped her work. Shit. Todoroki was controlling the temperature. The cold would make Aizawa worse. Azui firmly gave a thumbs down in Todoroki's direction, his confused look earning a pointed look from her. Warm air flooded the room within seconds. Aizawa raised his eyebrows but seemed to visibly relax. "Questions 4 and 7 are wrong," he muttered, handing it back. "Thank you, sensei," Azui replied, hurrying back to her seat. She sat down and turned round to Todoroki. He motioned, writing to her, and she ripped off a corner of her own sheet. The note was passed from Kirishima to Koda to Sato and then finally to Todoroki. He opened it quickly, one eye on Aizawa. The teacher had definitely started to suspect that something was up. "He's running a temperature. Looks like flu? Why did I have to go up?" Todoroki ignored the last part, giving Azui a nod. Midoriya motioned to look at the note, and it was passed from Yaozu to Mineta, finally reaching the green-haired teen who read through it quickly. Bakugo snapped his fingers under the table and Midoriya shoved it in his hand, turning back to Todoroki. He made a drinking motion with one hand, eventually signing it out. He shrugged as if to ask a question and Todoroki nodded. Midoriya put up his hand. It took a moment before Aizawa breathed in, preparing himself for whatever the boy wanted to ask. "Midoriya? Can I go and get a drink?" "Please," he asked confidently, his voice trailing off as he spoke. "Yes," Aizawa replied. Midoriya paused. "Did you want one? A drink, that is?" he asked. Aizawa's eyebrows raised but his demeanor faltered as he gripped his hands, swallowing deeply. "I'm fine," he breathed, the most unfine he'd sounded all morning. "It's no trouble, Dash." "Do what you want," Aizawa interrupted quickly, the talking clearly not doing him any favors. Midoriya nodded enthusiastically before pacing out of the room, sending his classmates a small triumphant smile. It didn't take long before he returned. There was only one plastic cup of water in his hands, but no one questioned it as he sat it down in front of his teacher, silently returning to his work. Aizawa had assumed a position of lying his head on his desk, his arms curled up so it looked as if he could be sleeping. "Aizawa-sensei," Ida cried, standing up. "Ida," Aizawa stated tiredly, his voice muffled through his sleeves. "Are you sure you're well?" Ida asked, the class whipping their heads around to gauge their teacher's reaction. "I'm fine," Aizawa growled, annoyed at being interrupted and beginning to stand. "I'm getting my sleeping bag." Aizawa began to move to the corner of the room but only made it 2 steps before faltering. Shoji got to him first, Midoriya soon behind. Aizawa waved them away but they stayed close. "I'm fine," he repeated shakily. "I'm tired, I'm going to sleep it off." "Should we get another teacher?" Midoriya asked, not about to tell his teacher just how much he was leaning on him. "Don't you dare," came the cold reply. "Todoroki, turn off your quirk or I'll erase it." Todoroki looked as if he was about to argue but faltered. He reluctantly stopped producing warm air. He didn't want Aizawa to have to use his quirk, he'd probably throw up or something. "Hand me that," Aizawa muttered to Shoji, motioning to his sleeping bag. Shoji did as he was asked and Aizawa, still leaning onto Midoriya for support, got inside the yellow sleeping bag, lowering himself to the floor in the far corner of the room and twisting himself around. "I'm fine," he said, curling himself up tightly. "Now get on with your work." Both boys were at a loss for words, turning back to their classmates who all held the same expressions. They returned to the sheets but this time no one was really doing any work. It took 5 minutes before Hagakure crept out of her seat. "He's asleep," she confirmed as she peered over her desk. Are you sure? Zero asked, trying to do the same. This is Aizawa we're talking about. Yeah, he's out, Hagakure replied. Thank God, Kaminari sighed, sliding down his seat. That was the most intense homeroom I've ever been in. It's not over yet, Jiro quipped, getting up to join Hagakure next to their homeroom teacher. She knelt down slowly and raised her hand to his forehead. Christ, he's hot. How hot? Ida asked quickly. Not life-threateningly hot but defo fever level, she replied with a shrug. He looks cold though. I'm using my quirk again, Todoroki announced. Take my seat then, Hagakure offered. You'll be closer that way. Okay, thank you, the boy replied, moving to the front of the room. I can make a blanket, it's not too much trouble, Yaoyorozu suggested, a couple of students nodding. We don't want to wake him up though, Midoriya warned. True, Shoji added. Although I don't think a blanket will do that. I think we should still get someone, Ojiro said. I agree, Ida confirmed. As class rep, it is my responsibility to take control when our teacher is dash. He looks so cute all curled up. Ashido cried, interrupting Ida and earning a variation of hushes from her classmates. He's ill, Midoriya pointed out. I know, Ashido pouted. Still cute though. He's like double our age, Kaminari joked. Shut up. Not like that. Ida and I will go get help? Ojiro asked the room. There were some nods and a few yes, and the boys left. I have the blanket, Yaoyorozu announced as she made her way to the front of the room. This may be needed, Aoyama added, placing the trash can beside Aizawa's head. There were some grimaces at the thought of seeing their teacher be sick. Want a hand? Midoriya asked, taking 2 corners of the blanket off of Yaoyorozu. She smiled graciously and the two slowly draped it across their teacher. As it brushed past his hand, Aizawa shuffled, grabbing the fabric and pulling it into himself. Ashido squealed. What's happening here then, listeners? The distinctive voice of Present Mike cut through the whispers. The man walked up between the students, his usual brashness subdued in what could only be described as worry. The class moved aside as the pro knelt down beside their homeroom teacher. What have you done now, Shoda? Aizawa groaned with the commotion and shifted, face-palming the floor. Come on now, wake up sleepyhead, Mike smiled, shaking Aizawa's shoulder softly. Aizawa shivered as Mike placed a hand around the back of his head, turning him around. Aizawa came to and batted his best friend away, sitting up slowly and looking around bleary-eyed. I thought I told you not to get someone, he muttered softly, groaning as he looked up at the light. Oh, shut up, Shoda, Mike scolded. You should take a look at yourself. How the hell did you expect to teach in this state? Aizawa grunted in response, pulling his arms out of the sleeping bag to cover his eyes. Who got the blanket? Mike asked, pulling it around Aizawa's shaking shoulders. Yaoyorozu shyly put her hand up. Yaoyorozu did, Jiro said for her. Good thinking, Mike commended. And Todoroki, you using your quirk? Yes, sensei. Keep it up if you can. Yes, sensei. Deku got the water. Uraraka piped up. Oh, and Aoyama the trash can, Midoriya added, as the aforementioned bin was pushed in the teacher's direction. Hizashi passed it to Aizawa and the man took it, holding it underneath his head and leaning his forehead on the rim. Azui also took his temperature. Good job, little listeners, Mike smiled as the bell rang. Right, go to break, I've got him from here. Todoroki, Ida and Ojiro, can I borrow you? We need to get him to Recovery Girl. Yes, Mike-sensei, the boys chorused. Not that she'll be able to do anything, you're so exhausted, Mike warned Aizawa, pulling a strand of black hair out of the bin. Aizawa groaned. The class reluctantly packed up their stuff, moving to the training grounds ready for Heroics 101. It was unnerving to see their teacher anything but in control. But hey, it was nice to see that in essence, he was really just one of them. It was Saturday morning, first period, and 1A was tired. To be honest, tired was really an understatement. The class had had a movie night on the Friday night, whilst Aizawa was out on patrol. Vlad King had only come in to check on them twice, and before the group had realized it, it was 1 a.m. In fact, the only student who wasn't tired was Bakugo. He'd gone to bed at 9. None of them, however, could be bothered to deal with lunch rush's overly chirpy teaching style at 8:40 a.m. on the weekend. So it was almost a good thing when Aizawa walked through the door. Ida, who was busying himself by pushing Ashido towards the direction of her seat, stopped and stared as the homeroom teacher padded to the empty desk. The rest of the class followed suit, edging towards their workstations, silence falling across the room. Aizawa-sensei? Midoriya piped up from his stool. Where's lunch rush? On patrol, Aizawa replied shortly. There was a villain that required his skill set dash. What villain? Kaminari excitedly interrupted. I can't tell you that, Aizawa shut him down. Why not? Because it is a police matter, Kaminari. Ida cried, standing up before promptly sitting down, his arms still waving. I just forgot, Aizawa admitted. He felt 19 pairs of eyes shift. There are hundreds of villains. You're not going to be able to remember them all. What are we going to do then? Ashido asked with a smile. Do we get a free period? Oh, sleep. My best friend, Shiro grinned. I quite like home AC, Azui mumbled from the corner of the room. Me too, Todoroki agreed from beside her. Just because you're good at it? Shiro groaned at the pair. Yes, probably, Azui replied. I'm teaching you home economics, Asval growled, interrupting them. There was a stunned silence, a shuffling of seats before. I have no idea what I'm doing, he muttered. The class relaxed, slightly grinning at their teacher who surprisingly smirked back. Aizawa picked up a sheet and looked at it dimly. Soba? Who doesn't know how to make soba? Ida doesn't know how to peel a fucking potato, Bakugo answered with a growl, Ida turning to face the boy. Bakugo! I do, he cried, upset. I know how to eat soba. Kaminari grinned. Aizawa pinched the bridge of his nose. You all have this sheet in front of you, don't you? He asked, holding up the recipe sheet. There was a chorus of nods and their homeroom teacher peered at it. Then get on with it. The room, apart from Todoroki, stared at him. Todoroki himself started getting out ingredients before stopping at his classmates' reaction. What? Aizawa asked. What does lunch rush normally do? Ida raised his hand, standing. Usually we get a briefing on kitchen safety dash, she started. Don't kill yourselves, Aizawa interrupted. Ida stuttered. Oh, or anyone else, he added as an afterthought. Then what? Usually we make it alongside lunch rush, Midoriya replied sheepishly, gauging his teacher's reaction. Step by step, Uraraka added. Aizawa's nose flared. But we don't have to? Uraraka finished, her voice trailing. Someone make me a coffee, Aizawa told the room. Everyone looked at one another, no one daring to move. Black? Todoroki got out of his seat and flicked on the hob by his workstation. Right, get out your ingredients, Aizawa mumbled, committing himself to the hellish torture that was cooking with 20 teenagers. How much sleep have you had, Aizawa-sensei? Ashido asked as she tied her apron. None. Sugar? Todoroki asked, pouring boiling coffee into a mug. No, Aizawa replied before hesitating. Wait, how long does this class go on for? 50 minutes, but we usually use up break as well. Okay, I might need sugar. Todoroki heaped a teaspoon into the cup. More? How many spoonfuls? The teen asked. Todoroki smirked. It's all or nothing, kid, Aizawa commented as Todoroki brought the steaming mug over to the front of the room. May I remind you that we should do the register, Aizawa-sensei? Ida called. It is first period after all. Aizawa nodded before peering around the room. Is everyone here? He asked. Everyone apart from Hagakure, Yaoyorozu called from where she was helping Azui get her apron on. Anyone know where she is? No one replied. Easy enough to find out, Aizawa said, making a mental note and downing half the coffee in one. Right? Soba. This was going to be interesting. 20 minutes in, and Aizawa had decided that he was never going to let his class cook dinner ever again. Azui, what have I told you about picking up ingredients with your tongue? Aizawa sighed as the teen sheepishly dropped the tongueful of bean sprouts out of her mouth. Sorry, sensei, she replied. Does lunch rush let you get away with that? He says it's a good use of our quirks. Midoriya cried. It made sense, the man didn't have a face. He also says never to share our food once we're done, Todoroki added. Aizawa looked at the clock on the wall. Everyone turn the heat on your pans down, he commanded in monotone. The soba should be about done. God, he hated how domesticated he sounded. Christ, if these kids couldn't boil water and then there was no hope for Bakugo, why's your pan on fire? Shit. I was trying to use my quirk, the teen snapped at Ida, who was attempting to cover the flames with a tea towel. If I fill the pan with my sweat, then I can just blow the soba up and it'll cook quicker. Bro, you can't eat nitroglycerin. Kirishima cried from across his best friend. I can. The pan's melting. Geez, you've got the gas on Bakugo. It's going to explode. Kaminari yelled. I got this. Shiro yelled, sending a line of tape to catch the handle of the pan. He managed to pull the melting metal away from the flames, but in doing so threw some of the boiling liquid onto Bakugo's arm. The teen hissed, stepping backwards, and just as Ida's tea towel caught alight, there was a crackle and Todoroki's ice encased the station. Aizawa threw himself over to turn off the gas as Todoroki's ice receded into water. Did you even know the exploding point of nitroglycerin? Ida asked after a few seconds of heavy silence. Fucking whatever, Bakugo hissed. Bakugo! Aizawa yelled, pulling the boy around to face him. How stupid and reckless do you want to be? What if you'd blown the place up? Then what? Bakugo shrugged but looked bashful enough. You will be paying for every bit of damage done to this classroom. UA may be a free rein to use your quirks, but that's not an excuse to take the piss. Bakugo nodded. As for the rest of you, Aizawa cried, addressing the class. Shiro, crap idea, shocking execution, what the hell were you thinking? Sorry, sensei. Aizawa took a breath. Todoroki, your quirk is ice? The teenager looked puzzled. Water? And that dash, he pointed at the gas stove. Was a gas fire? Oh, only Ida had the right idea, using the towel to smother the flames. Ida stood. But if you're going to comment on the fact that I didn't do a safety briefing, then you can sit back down immediately, Aizawa glared. Ida sat. Bakugo shifted behind them. Todoroki stepped forward, and before the explosive teen could push him away, he placed one palm over the affected arm, covering it with a thin layer of frost. Fuck off, icy hot. Bakugo, Aizawa said, stepping in front of the teen and gesturing for his arm. The boy reluctantly handed it over, and the pro looked it over with a sigh. Go to recovery, girl. This may be your sweat, but it was still over 100 degrees. You're burnt? I don't need the old woman, Bakugo snapped, trying and failing to pull his arm away from his homeroom teacher. Recovery, girl. Go, he warned. Bakugo pouted but didn't argue back. Kirishima, go with him. And don't use this as an excuse to get out of next period. Both your grades in physics aren't living up to last term standards. Yes, sensei. Kirishima cheered, grabbing Bakugo's free hand. Come on, bro. Let go of my hand, Bakugo growled whilst making no actual attempt to pull himself away as the two exited the classroom. This entire table is going to have to move, the pro explained. I won't know where the rest of the nitroglycerin will have hit until it stains, and I'm not risking heating up the area in case it explodes. Find a partner, he told Kaminari, Shiro, and Tokoyami. The three boys looked around the room, finally wandering over to another classmate. Tokoyami gratefully paired with Midoriya, Shiro with Ishido, and Kaminari with Sato. What you putting on your soba, Sato? Kaminari asked, dragging his stool over. Sato pulled a 2 kilograms bag of granulated sugar over one shoulder and slammed it down on the counter. Nice. Now we have partners, we could make it into a bit of a competition. Ishido said, her arm linked with Aoyama. To lighten the mood Aoyama stage whispered, eyeing up their homeroom teacher who was inspecting the damage to the other desk, fury radiating off of him. What, like a food war? Kaminari grinned. I don't want to be compared to some other subpar shonen, Aoyama pouted. Aoyama, your 2D is showing, Ishido warned. J'aime être le sujet de rêves, fangirls? Yeah. Cool. Kaminari beamed awkwardly. Even if the competition is just between us, that way Aizawa can't get pissed. Did someone mention competition? Todoroki asked from behind them. Where did you come from to do? Ishido asked. I needed the scissors, he replied, picking them off of the table. I want to be part of the competition. Well, yeah, sure. Ashido agreed. Todoroki nodded curtly. Bring it on. He does realize that it's just a friendly thing, right? Ashido murmured as the boy walked back to his station. It's Todoroki, Kaminari reasoned. Probably not. Midoriya and Tokoyami also want to be part of the competition. Jesus! Todoroki! Ashido cried, her hand instantly rising to her chest. You gave me a heart attack? Sorry, Todoroki replied. I was handing the scissors back. That was quick, Kaminari remarked. The trio looked over to Midoriya's table. Dark Shadow was giving them a thumbs up and Midoriya seemed to be punching the airs plus ultra style. Uraraka was pointing to herself and then her saucepan of soba. Uraraka wants to be part of the competition as well? This is going to be cool. Ashido grinned as they watched Ida push up his glasses. Ida wants to be part of the competition too? Yeah, we're getting the idea, thanks man, Kaminari smiled. How long do we have left of the lesson, Aizawa-sensei? Midoriya asked, a glint in his eye. 20 minutes. Remember you're meant to be writing up your recipes in your workbooks, Aizawa replied, turning back to his desk. And if anyone mentions anything about nitroglycerin then I'll drag you into detention alongside Bakugo. Got it? There were a collection of nods and the competition was on. Okay, we're going to have to rethink, man, Kaminari turned to Sato. That's too much sugar. What are you thinking? Sato asked. Chocolate? Yeah man. It had been ages since Aizawa properly cooked. Usually, he went to a 7-Eleven after his shifts or sometimes an instant ramen would do. Mostly he was just fueled on coffee. To be honest, he would always be grateful for UA for providing a canteen service. He knew what good nutrition was, but it was always something he'd worry about later. Saying that he was a good cook. Compared to 19, well now 17 teenagers at least. Bakugo should be grateful he was on the hero course or Aizawa would have kicked him out months ago. Along with the rest of Class 1A. What are you doing with your soba, Aizawa? Azui asked as she walked past him to collect some soy sauce, with her hands this time. Obujin, sesame seeds and edamame. With some sort of miso glaze, I haven't got it figured out yet, he murmured as he chopped vegetables. Wow, you're good, Azui complimented her homeroom teacher. Get on with your work, Aizawa replied with a small smirk. I think it needs more chocolate, Kaminari commented as him and Sato opened a new packet. Be careful it doesn't burn, Yaoyorozu commented as she passed the table. Don't worry, we're not Bakugo. Kaminari grinned, earning a small smile and raised eyebrow from Momo. What do you think of mine? Ashido asked the girl as she came over. Why is it pink? Food coloring. Ashido smiled. I think it looks cute this way. It certainly looks unique. Yaoyorozu replied with a smile. Is that edible glitter? She asked Aoyama. Oui. Isn't it magnifique? Again, certainly something. How's Todoroki doing? Aoyama suddenly asked in a hushed whisper, pulling Momo down towards him. Oh. Are okay, I think. Yaoyorozu replied sheepishly. It looks like soba. That's no help. Ashido cried. Well, compared to yours, I think it's a good description. Hey, Tokoyami. What are you doing for yours? Midoriya asked the boy as he watched Dark Shadow fetch ingredients for the teen. Well, I had two choices, but I think I've decided, Tokoyami smiled. Oh, what? Uraraka asked, peering over his workbench. Chicken, Tokoyami replied. What was the second option? Midoriya asked nervously. Duck? Oh, interesting. Uraraka cried, a little too enthusiastically. How about you, Midoriya? Tokoyami asked. Oh, it's my mum's recipe, Midoriya beamed. So is mine, Ida chimed in. Passed down through the generations? You're so noble, Ida, Uraraka giggled. This recipe was also passed down through my family, Tokoyami said, holding up a chicken breast. We serve it at funerals. Obviously, we don't use chicken however. Tokoyami, Ida started. Are you saying you your dash? Yes. The table paled. I'm joking. Tokoyami cried, beginning to laugh. We don't eat our relatives. Tokoyami. Oh my god. Uraraka squealed. Tokoyami, please, Ida asked, placing his hands on the boy's shaking shoulders. Don't do that to me. Tokoyami would have replied if he wasn't laughing so hard. Midoriya was speechless. We make good crackling, Tokoyami added before wheezing. Plate up and clear up. Aizawa called. There's only 5 minutes until break and I'm not staying into next period. Isn't it Aizawa's day off? Yaoyorozu asked Azui as she ran the tap. Ribbit, yep, Azui replied. Wow. Do you think he's eaten? Yaoyorozu murmured. Probably not, Azui commented. I would have offered him my soba but it has grasshoppers in it. Azui, what? Jiro asked from across the table. They're nice, Azui defended. Don't worry, I wasn't judging. Jiro laughed. How did you find them? Off the ground, Azui croaked back. Yaoyorozu and Jiro gave one another a grin. Their class was weird. I'm back, Kirishima cried, coming through the door. Good, there's washing up to do, Aizawa commented. What? How's Bakugu? Siro asked as the redhead came over to their workstation. Oh, he's okay, all fixed up, but recovery girl told him to rest. He wasn't too pleased about that, idiot, Kirishima grinned. Come and help with the washing up then, Ishido pouted. Yeah, sure, Kirishima replied, walking over to where his friend was. Why is everything pink and glittery? 5 minuets later and the bell rang. Aizawa was drying off his hands and turned to the class who stood behind their workstation, steaming bowls of soba in front of them. They hadn't done half bad. Considering. Time for the judging. Ishido cried. The what? Aizawa asked. Oh, sorry. We decided to have a little competition, Ishido smiled. Sensei, can you be the judge? Jiro asked. Oh, I'm not in the competition, she added with a grin. I just want to see what you thought. Plus you must be hungry, Yaoyorozu commented shyly. Aizawa sighed. Fine, bring them up here. He was presented with 4 bowls of steaming hot soba, 1 completely cold one, 1 glitter bomb, 1 brown one, was it burnt or was that chocolate? Oh wait, it was both, and 1 bowl of pink snakes. Oh wait, that was soba? I'm not eating this one or this one, he stated, pushing 3 bowls away from him. Or this one. 2 base quoi? Wait, why? Ishido cried. Oh sensei. Kaminari pouted. That looks like your vomit, Aizawa motioned to Aoyama's bowl. And that looks peroxide. I didn't use my quirk. Well, you may as well have done. And this one is burnt? It is? Sato asked. Don't say it's I told you or you're dead, Kaminari hissed at Momo. She grinned back. This one looks the most aesthetically pleasing, Aizawa stated, pointing to Todoroki's. The taste, I'll let you know this evening when you come back to dorms. What? Aizawa-sensei, why? Please? No, Aizawa cut them off, motioning to the clock. You have physics in 10 minuets. Hand in your workbooks on your way out, tell no one about the last 50 minuets or you'll be dead and have a productive day. He rushed, shooing his students out of the classroom. Aizawa, this is too cruel. How did mine not get most aesthetically pleasing? I won. No, you didn't, Todoroki. You were disqualified. I won. There were more people than just you dash. Aizawa let the door slide shut on the last student and crumpled in Lunch Rush's chair. God, he was hungry. Picking up Tokoyami's bowl of soba, he started eating. It was hot and flavorful, especially coming from the chicken broth. Chicken broth. Aizawa ignored that. Picking up the workbooks, he flicked through them, happy that at least the period was over. He landed on today's date and scanned through it for obvious spelling mistakes. The first word he read was nitroglycerin. Fucking goddammit. Aizawa opened the door to the 1A dorms with a heavy arm. Patrol had dragged. The day before had been the last day of term and the homeroom teacher had left the dismissal of his class to Vlad King as his students went home for the holidays. Right, with an empty dorm he had a few hours of napping before he should probably pack up and make his way back to his own flat. As he shut the door behind him, however, he heard a noise coming from the common area. He froze. Hello, he called out, his capture weapon floating towards his free hand. There shouldn't be anyone here. The kids went home yesterday. So someone had broken in. Who's there? He called, edging towards the sound. The tiredness had faded, replaced by adrenaline. He was ready to fight if he needed to. Coming round the corner, he noticed a figure on one of the sofas, blankets piled high. What the dash? Sensei? A voice asked, a head poking up from the mountain of cloth. Todoroki, Aizawa stuttered in reply. What dash? He retracted his capture weapon, allowing time to compose himself. What are you doing here? He repeated. I didn't want to go home, the boy replied before the head disappeared behind the sofa once more. Alarm bells rang in Aizawa's mind. Something was wrong. The teen was acting extremely out of character, not looking at his teacher, not avoiding his damn questions like usual. It was worrying. Why? He asked, coming forward so he could see the mass of white and red hair coating the furniture. I didn't want to see Dad, Torikoki replied, a lump growing in Aizawa's throat. You're going to have to give me more than that, kid, Aizawa prompted, an edge to his voice. He wanted to go training this weekend, Todoroki stated. And I really don't want to train. Why not? Aizawa asked, fearing the worst. Todoroki just shrugged back, clearly not in the mood to talk. Did something happen? There was a pause before Todoroki shook his head. Where does your father think you are? Aizawa asked, changing tact. He was already dreading the 20 missed calls and the angry complaints to the school that Endeavor would inevitably aim at him when he found out his kid hadn't returned for the holidays. I told my dad I was doing extra classes here for the weekend, Todoroki replied. Aizawa's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Extra classes would come with the connotation that the boy was failing. Whatever the reason for not wanting to see his father, it must be bad for the teen to lie like that. Why didn't you want to go home and train, Todoroki? Aizawa pressed, slightly annoyed that the boy was still half turned away from him, wrapped up in blankets on the sofa. There was a long pause, a shuffle under the blankets before. I don't feel well, Todoroki replied softly. As Aizawa approached the sofa, he could begin to tell that Todoroki did, in fact, look sick. His hair was sticking to his forehead slightly, bags under his eyes, shivering despite being covered in blankets. Aizawa moved one hand across the boy's forehead. You're burning up, he remarked. Todoroki shrugged. I think it's the flu, he suggested. Ike? Have you been sick? A small nod. Once. Then you're probably right, Aizawa sighed. Great. Now he had a sick kid to look after over the weekend. Just his luck. At least it was Todoroki. The teen was pretty self-sufficient. Todoroki, Aizawa asked, kneeling down in front of the sofa so he had the teen's full attention. Would your father have forced you to train? The pause. No, Todoroki replied, mulling over the question. Probably not anyway. I'm a lot stronger now. Aizawa gave him a look. He would have insisted pretty hard, I guess. And your sister? Could she not look after you? I don't want anyone looking after me. Fair enough. Well, you can't stay here without there being a member of staff living here as well, Aizawa explained. That got the teen's attention. Todoroki wearily looked up, a face full of disappointment. Do I have to go home? He asked. Luckily, I have a meeting tomorrow morning. I was going to move back to my flat tonight, but it makes no difference to me if I stay the weekend, Aizawa explained, watching the boy's face relax. You can't go home in this state anyway. I didn't mean to inconvenience you, Todoroki apologized. You're not, Aizawa lied, moving around the sofa. No wonder you're shivering, half the blankets are on the damn floor, he commented, picking up one corner of the cloth and throwing it onto the teen. Look at you, you look like a slob. Todoroki looked up momentarily but noticed Aizawa smirking and laid his head back down. Move up, Aizawa commanded, Todoroki curling his legs up so that Aizawa could sit beside him. What am I going to do with you kids? Todoroki looked up bashfully at his homeroom teacher, who leant across to pick up the remote. Don't you have any plans for today? The teen asked. I was out on patrol last night, so sleeping probably, Aizawa yawned. How was it? Uneventful. Mostly petty theft, one villain robbed a small corner shop. That was about as interesting as it got. Good for society. Yeah, Aizawa agreed. Good for society. He flicked through channels for a while, shuffling down on the sofa to get more comfortable. Wouldn't you rather sleep in your room? Todoroki asked from his laid-down position. No, Aizawa lied again. Okay, Todoroki murmured, his eyes sliding shut. Aizawa watched him fall asleep with a sigh. Happy holidays to them both. He left the TV on the news channel, turning the volume right down before letting his own eyes close. He'd slept in worse positions. Hell, once he'd slept leaning on Ida's bed. What a pain. Aizawa reawoke to the sound of retching. He looked across at the empty spot beside him, patting the still warm blankets. The retches continued. Todoroki, he called. Are you okay? There was a small silence before a small voice called back. Yeah. Like hell, was that kid okay? Aizawa sighed, standing up. What did he do to deserve this kind of luck? He was going to kill Endeavor the next time he saw him, the shit parent. Todoroki could handle himself for sure, but that didn't mean the 15-year-old should have to. The worst thing was, Aizawa knew that if Todoroki had gone home, more than likely he would have pushed through training the next day. And Endeavor would probably have let him. Bastard. The pro located the noise to the shared toilet just off the kitchen. He rapped on the ajar door and waited. Todoroki? Don't come in, a voice choked back. I'm okay. All right, Aizawa replied, giving the teen his privacy. He didn't move from the doorway, however, flicking on his phone and scrolling through the messages, sending a quick reply. 5 minutes later, and Aizawa heard the toilet flush, the tap running before finally Todoroki pushed open the door. He'd paled considerably but looked a lot less uncomfortable. You're still here, he muttered tiredly. Come on, Aizawa commanded after checking his student's forehead. Medicine and water. We need to get that temperature down. Why are you doing this? The boy asked, following his teacher. It must be an inconvenience, he repeated. Don't be so ridiculous, Aizawa scolded lightly. Todoroki didn't argue. Instead, he flopped back down on the sofa, the little energy he had, completely zapped. Aizawa grabbed a glass from the cupboard, filling it with water and grabbing 2 paracetamol from the first aid kit. You still cold, kid? He asked as he approached the shivering teen. Todoroki replied by pulling the blankets closer to him. Okay, sit up, he motioned, handing him the glass and tablets. He left the room with a yawn, waking up the heating and pulling some extra blankets from the laundry cupboard. Won't you get ill as well if you're around me? Todoroki asked as Aizawa collected the still full cup and shoved the blankets onto his students. I have a surprisingly strong immune system, he replied in his usual monotone. Me too, Todoroki replied. Most of the time. You need to drink more, Aizawa stated, handing the glass back to the reluctant teen. Midnight's coming over. She wants to go through grades for tomorrow morning. That okay? Todoroki nodded, miserably sipping on the water. Kid couldn't be trusted to look after himself. I don't want any more, Todoroki complained, pushing the cup in Aizawa's direction. I want a straw. Don't be stubborn, Aizawa replied, refusing to take it. Todoroki sighed. I'm tired, he pushed. Drink it? Todoroki continued to take baby sips, slumped on the cushions, thoroughly pissed off. The kid wasn't used to having someone look after him clearly. Aizawa let him get away with drinking half and Todoroki was out cold in a minute. The pro grabbed some cleaning supplies from the kitchen, first wiping down the surfaces then going into the adjoining toilet. He was just about done when his phone rang. He took one look at the caller and headed to the lift, clicking the button to open the main door. There was a second and the lift word, finally opening to the, albeit toned down, form of Midnight. It's winter, Aizawa stated, looking down at her crop top and jeans. Aren't you cold? Shota, she cooed loudly. Pleasant as ever. Aizawa placed a finger to his lips, beckoning her in. Keep your voice down, he said. What? Why dash? Midnight began to protest as Aizawa pointed her gaze in the direction of the sleeping Todoroki. He's come down with the flu, he explained. I can't send him home like this. Right? Midnight replied. Don't worry, you won't get it, Aizawa sighed. I gave the surfaces a once-over, just in case. I have a mask, Midnight smiled, relaxing slightly. You could send him home Yano, she smirked. It might be more comfortable for him. No, Aizawa stated. I have a feeling he'd be allowed to recover by himself and that won't do. He's safer in UA. With you, Midnight winked. If you like. Shota. You've always been such a dash. Don't you dare say it, Aizawa interrupted with a snarl. Say what? Midnight asked. The F word. Midnight looked at him confused. Father. Shota, she laughed with a glint in her eye. I wouldn't dare. Good. You're more like a mother hen. Shut up, Aizawa growled. Oh, but what about you and Hisashi? Whenever he was sick, you'd always go round to his and cook and dash. What part of keeping your voice down did you not understand? Aizawa grumbled. Sorry, I thought I might be muffled, Midnight quipped, attaching her mask over her ears. Lief, you going home this Christmas then? Midnight asked, changing the conversation as the two headed towards the table. Yeah, for a week or so. I don't want to leave Tokyo too long with the crime rate on the rise for the holidays. Where did your parents move again? Wajima, Ishikawa Prefecture. Oh, that's a trek. An hour flight. Beautiful city though. Can I come with? Midnight joked. Sure, Aizawa replied. My mum always loved you. That because she always thought I was going to end up as your girlfriend? Oh, Aizawa smirked. Yeah. 2 hours passed and Todoroki didn't murmur from his space on the sofa. Midnight and Aizawa were halfway through Class 1 as Modern Hero Art History grades. So what are we giving him? AB-? Midnight asked as they flicked through student reports. I still think he's AC, Aizawa muttered. No, he has potential. I think if we swapped his seat away from Bakugu, he might stand a chance in my lesson, she argued. I like my seating plan. Oh, give over, Midnight scolded. B-. Fine. Next. Wait, Aizawa said suddenly, turning in his chair. Why? Midnight started. Listen. Midnight did, and as she homed in on the sounds within the room, she began to hear what sounded like cries from the other side of the room. Aizawa had already gotten up, striding to the sofas. Todoroki? Aizawa asked, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. He pulled it away quickly with a hiss. Namuri, I think he's losing control over his quirk. Midnight looked up from her report and moved closer to where her childhood friend was looking over his student. Todoroki's right side was covered in patches of frost, his left beginning to turn a shade of pink from the heat. His mouth was still moving as well, incoherent nonsense about training spilling out of his mouth. I think you're right, she agreed, watching Aizawa's brain whir. Right, he said shortly, his hair rising. Immediately the frost on the teen started to dissipate, Todoroki's face relaxing as his quirk was detained. And now what? Midnight asked with a laugh. You can't do that forever. I don't have to, Aizawa replied, using his hands to feel out for the coffee table behind him, dragging it closer to the sofa, while still keeping an eye on Todoroki. He sat on the furniture and leaned his chin on his hands. I can stay like this for a couple of minutes and then give myself a break. It's only until his fever passes. Shota, you can't do that, Midnight scolded. You'll overuse your quirk? And what's the alternative? Aizawa asked. It'll be quirk training for me. Read the reports from the table, he suggested. We can work out amendments like this. Why are you doing this? She asked suddenly. Midnight watched as Aizawa sighed, his eyes focusing on his student before glazing over. The boy didn't want to go home because he didn't want to tell his dad he was ill, Aizawa started. It felt wrong, Midnight finished for him. The kid needs to learn that just because he's sick, he doesn't automatically become an inconvenience to everyone else, Aizawa continued with some determination. And if that means that I have to sit by him and remove his quirk for however long just to prove it to him, then I will. Midnight smiled behind her mask. If there was a reason Aizawa was a hero, then this was it. She'd seen him grow up, not get into the hero course, only to then be fast-tracked into her class. She'd seen him gain his provisional license, cry from his first death, his first defeat. Drank with him when the three got jobs at UA. Devastated for him, when he'd temporarily lost his place as a teacher after their USJ incident. He would do anything to protect his students, and she knew he still thought of himself as a failure. You're reckless, she sighed. There are better ways. Wake the kid up, she replied. Get him to gain control back over his quirk himself. He needs rest, Aizawa reasoned. So do you. Midnight reminded him with a sigh. Give me half an hour like this and then I'll think about it, Aizawa compromised. Fine. Where are your eye drops? My room, bedside table, bottom drawer. Okay. And no snooping. No way. Wait, was that a no way as in you wouldn't? Or a no way as in of course you're going to? Midnight? Aizawa hissed as she left. Brilliant. She returned a few minutes later, eye drops in one hand. What did you do? Aizawa asked as he gave himself a break, eyes closing. Nothing. Aizawa stared. Through closed eyes. I tidied up a bit. Namuri, why? Aizawa groaned. Everything is in a specific place for a dash. Reason, yeah, I know, Midnight smiled. You haven't changed one bit, Shota. Nor have you, Aizawa replied, opening his eyes and twisting the top off of the eye drops. You're not putting Christmas decorations up in my flat this year again, by the way. Why not? Stupid Western culture, Aizawa snapped, focusing his attention back on the teen. His temperature isn't coming down, he added, concerned, pulling some of the blankets off of him. Want me to turn the heating off? Midnight asked. Yeah, Aizawa replied, taking back control of Todoroki's quirk. On it, Midnight smiled. Also, I'm 100% buying you a tree. You're not. I am. It'll die. It's a tree that's been cut from the trunk, Shota. It's already dead. Aizawa gave up. 15 minutes passed, and after 11 breaks, Aizawa's energy was all but gone. He let go of the control on the boy and rubbed his eyes. Todoroki, he prompted, shaking the boy's shoulder. Todoroki, you need to wake up. It took a while, but the boy eventually murmured, pulling himself out of his slumber and opening one eye. Take control of your quirk, Aizawa commanded softly. Todoroki blinked at him, focusing on bringing his body temperature to a level head. You can't go back to sleep yet, he continued. You'll kill yourself. I wake up on my own before it gets too bad, Todoroki mumbled. Aizawa breathed in deeply. Well, you're not on your own, he replied. How do you feel? Todoroki shrugged tiredly. Shrugging, as Aizawa was quickly learning, seemed to be code for really not okay. You look awful, Aizawa remarked. So do you, Todoroki replied, causing Midnight to laugh from the across the room. Midnight, he murmured. Heard you weren't feeling well, she smiled, popping her head over her chair. You should wear a mask as well, Todoroki pointed at his homeroom teacher, still feverish, his voice beginning to rise in pitch. I don't want you getting ill because of me. I won't, Aizawa tried to reassure him, aware he may be fighting a losing battle. It'd be too late now anyway. That was the wrong thing to say. Todoroki's eyes widened as he forced his body to move, pushing himself off of the sofa but crashing into the coffee table at the same time. Whoa, kid, where do you think you're going? Aizawa asked, Midnight looking up from the papers. I need to, you can't get ill as well, it'd be bad dash. Todoroki. I'd be bad. Stop it. You're not bad. I don't, Todoroki started, half standing, half wavering. Come on now, Aizawa said, standing himself and placing both hands on the boy's shoulders. Again he had to pull away without warning, frost creeping past his fingertips. Shota? Midnight asked as she heard her friend gasp out loud. My dad, Todoroki continued to whine. Your dad isn't here, Aizawa reassured him, but Todoroki was lost to the fever. He's going to be mad. No, he's not. Aizawa was at a bit of a loss. Todoroki was clawing his way forward, desperately and incoherently trying to move his homeroom teacher out of the way. Aizawa was strong enough to hold the teenager back, but Todoroki's hands were burning, one hot, one cold, and Aizawa's eyes were still red raw. Todoroki, calm down. I don't want to train. And you don't have to, just please lie down. Todoroki continued to shake his head, his eyes darting. Midnight, a little help here? Aizawa asked through gritted teeth. Hold your breath, the pro commanded as she came forward, unleashing her quirk. Todoroki was out cold in 2 seconds, his body luckily falling back onto the sofa, giving Aizawa just enough time to catch him, a blanket wrapped around one forearm, protecting his bare skin. Jesus, he grumbled. Shouldn't Endeavor really be here? Or at least informed? Midnight asked. I don't trust that man to look after a hamster, Aizawa growled. Wasn't the plan to wake him up? It's fine. Seems as if my quirk is acting more like a sedative than a sleeping pill. His quirk's not playing up, she replied. Midnight was right. Todoroki was calm once more, the color on his face an evener tone and the sweat on his forehead fading. Thank you, he muttered, yawning. Quite all right, Midnight replied. Do you want a drink? Coffee? Please, he asked. Okay, where's your mug? My mug? Midnight turned on Aizawa, her look cold. Shots Aizawa, please do not tell me you haven't drunk anything yet today? Aizawa didn't answer. What about food? Still no answer. Ow! Aizawa cried, as he felt a hand to the back of his head. It's nearly 3 in the afternoon. How can you agree to look after a 15-year-old when you can't look after yourself? Huh? You act like you're still living in dorms, lounging in clothes that haven't been washed for days, not eating properly. No wonder you're so damn skinny. No one is going to want to be your girlfriend whilst you look like this Shota, that's for sure. First things first dash. Please stop talking, Aizawa complained. My head hurts. First things first, Midnight continued, dropping the volume every so slightly and prodding her friend in the chest. To be a pro hero you need to take care of yourself before others or you won't make it. No wonder your head hurts, you've been overusing your quirk and you're probably dehydrated. I know how to be a hero. Only just. Oi, I still rank higher than you, Aizawa bit back with a smirk. Only on captures, not popularity, Midnight quipped. Sit down and finish marking, I'm going to make you some proper food. You don't have to do that. I know, Midnight sighed. But I have an hour before I should get ready for evening patrol and I might as well eat here as well. You're going to be shattered tomorrow, Aizawa remarked. Yes, I'm going to feel as tired as you look, Midnight pouted, earning a pointed look off of her childhood friend. Oi, and no giving anyone lower than an E. But that's half the fun, Aizawa muttered, pulling the blankets back over the sleeping Todoroki. Do you need help getting a spare futon out of the cupboard? Midnight asked, ignoring him and rifling through the cupboards. What for? Aizawa asked. You can't let the boy sleep on the sofa through the evening as well, Midnight scolded. You can drag his futon from his room and I'll get the spare one. Then you can both sleep in here. Why? Don't give me that Shota. I can see it in your face. You've already planned to sleep on the floor tonight because you're too lazy to get something out of the cupboard, Midnight challenged the man. He sighed, instead turning back to the mark sheet in front of him. Is that an F I see you writing? She asked. No, Aizawa lied, twisting his pencil over to the eraser. Todoroki woke up and nearly whined with the pain. His whole body ached. He tried to recall the events from yesterday and failed miserably. He remembered Aizawa coming home and sitting on the sofa with him. He remembered throwing up. Was Midnight there? He stopped trying to think, the light streaming in from the windows, hurting his eyes. Feeling around his surroundings, he was surprised to find that he was laying on his futon. In the common area. He turned over to his side, trying to get his bearings. Instead, he came face to face with a bucket, painkillers, his phone, and a note. The teen stuck his hand out and wearily grabbed the piece of paper, accidentally screwing it up in his hand. Pulling his other arm from underneath him, he unwrapped it, letting his eyes focus. Todoroki, gone to the meeting. Be back around lunch. Drink the water. I found you a straw. And phone me if you need me, my phone is on loud. I have told Endeavor you're staying to do extra training with me and Nizu next week, so don't worry about getting up or packing. You're staying here. Remember, phone me if you need me. Aizawa. Todoroki reread the note and flopped back onto the blankets. Knowing that he didn't have to get up, didn't have to train, didn't have to do work or be productive, that no one was on his back, someone believed he was ill. It felt nice. Comforting. The boy closed his eyes with a shiver, letting the ache in his body travel to the back of his head. He would drink the water in a bit. For now, he could just rest. Aizawa-sensei? Aizawa looked up from his laptop and marking to see the faces of Yaoru, Uraraka, and Azui looking down at him. It was just after dinner on a Tuesday evening and nearly all of the students had retired to their dorms. Aizawa had hoped for a little peace and quiet before he had to go out on patrol. Seemingly not. Yes, he asked as the girls looked among each other, seemingly deciding who should speak. What have you done? He tried asking. Oh, no, nothing, Yaoruzu replied quickly. We were just wondering. She looked across at Uraraka. Yes, we were just wondering. It's Jiro's birthday next week and Yaoruzu noticed that tickets to her favorite band come out tomorrow morning and we were wondering if we could buy them to go, she said, speaking quickly, twisting her thumb between her forefingers. Right? Aizawa said, processing what the girl had just said. What's that got to do with me? Well, the concert tickets come out tomorrow morning during homeroom, Azui started. Oh yeah, Uraraka commented, nodding. So time off, Aizawa replied, looking back down at his work. Also, Azui trailed. What? Aizawa asked, one eyebrow raised. We need someone over the age of 18 to come with, Azui continued. Otherwise we won't be allowed in. Right? Aizawa prompted. Well, Yairo's parents are abroad, Uraraka's parents can't afford the trip, and my parents would need to get a babysitter. Besides, the loud music would hurt my dad's ears. He's a full animal-human hybrid and so dash. You want me to come to the concert with you? Aizawa guessed, breaking Azui off mid-flow. The young teenager looked somewhat put out by being interrupted by her teacher but nodded all the same. What's the band called? Death, Yairuzu replied. That's an awful name, Aizawa muttered before sighing, opening a new tab and Googling the concert. How much are the tickets? Oh, I can get them on discount because of my dad, Yairuzu replied quickly. It's only the travel really. I can cover that, Aizawa sighed, looking at the webpage. Is that a yes? Uraraka asked hopefully. Yes. It's a yes, Aizawa said, watching the faces of his students burst into life. What's the exact date? The 1st, Yairuzu smiled. But we're going to surprise her with the tickets in the morning. Okay, Aizawa nodded, making a mental note in his head. Give me all the details closer to the time, I won't remember them now. Thank you, Aizawa-sensei, the girls clamored. Yeah, that's all right, Aizawa growled, waving them away. No, go to bed or do some work or something. It was only one night. And as much as Death sounded like the world's worst band, it wasn't like he would have to get involved. Right? Oh my god, it's sick, Kaminari. Jiro cried, blushing as she unwrapped her present from him. It was the Saturday morning homeroom and the whole of 1A was in the common area having a birthday breakfast for Jiro. Aizawa had let them, it was a good excuse for not having a lesson plan. The young hero in training was trying on her new ear muffs gleefully. Yeah, I kinda thought you'd be into them cause they have spaces for your jacks so you don't have to have your ears out when you're trying to listen to music in the winter, Kaminari was explaining as he was hit with a short hug from the girl. They're insane. Oh, well you're welcome. Kaminari grinned back, surprised that his friend had hugged him. Jiro wasn't really one for too much physical contact but the teen was so excited she could have been buzzing. Guys, this is too much, she explained as Ida placed a plate of birthday pancakes in front of her, a tradition in Heights Alliance. Not at all. Ida shook his head. You always do your utmost to ensure that we have wonderful birthdays, so it is up to us to return the favor. Well, thanks, Jiro smiled, knowing not to hug Ida, the surprise wouldn't be welcomed. Aizawa watched on from the kitchen, a cup of coffee in hand. He wasn't a birthday person at all, but it was nice seeing the whole of his class get on. He didn't sing happy birthday with them though. Then again, neither did Bakugu. Right? Your final present. Uraraka beamed as she approached her friend. This is from all the girls. Ah, dudes, thank you. Jiro cried, a mouthful of pancakes muffling her gratitude. Open it. Open it. Hagakura shouted as Jiro wiped her hands to take the envelope and slide it open. She took one look at it and screamed. You didn't? Aizawa rubbed his now broken ears to watch as Jiro shot up, coming over to her best friends who were nodding with grins on their faces. But how? These were sold out like instantly. And my parents weren't free to take me dash. We know, Yairuzu said. We found someone else to take us. Aizawa was in the middle of a swig of coffee when he felt someone crash into him, causing him to choke on his mouthful as he fumbled to put the cup down. Thank you, Aizawa-sensei. That's Oka-Aizawa started before heaving into an almighty coughing fit, the coffee hitting his windpipe. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Jiro started backing off as Aizawa shooed her away. It's fine, he grumbled, recovered. Just don't expect me to have as much enthusiasm as you do. I won't. Jiro cheered, not exactly the response Aizawa was after. You're cool, she smiled bashfully, becoming self-conscious once more. This is the best birthday. Alright, now make it the best birthday with perfect attendance in classes, Aizawa replied, pushing his student in the direction of the door. If you haven't killed yourself in home EC, I'll see you at 3:15. There were a chorus of yes senseis, Ida's notorious hand movements and the shoving of pancakes down students' throats before they were out of the door, leaving Aizawa in much-needed peace. He was going back to bed so he could try and forget just what laid in wait for him that evening. Aizawa didn't realize just how much preparation went into getting ready for a concert. The four of them had to leave at 6 to make the arena for 7, and it was only just gone 4, but somehow there was already panicking. I look ridiculous? Kyoka, you've never looked ridiculous a day in your life, Yaoyorozu scolded. The girls had been trying to get ready, Azui and Momo trying to do up Jiro's hair. My hair's too short, Jiro continued to complain, pulling it out of the loose bun it had been put into. No, Azui cried, but she was too late to save her handiwork. The only person who really looks good with a bun is Aizawa, Jiro finished, combing her hair through her hands. Aizawa almost wished he hadn't heard that. I just want it down, she finished, peering at herself in the mirror. I could grab my hair straighteners if you wanted? Uraraka offered and Jiro nodded gratefully. What are you guys wearing? Azui asked as she sat down on Momo's bed. Is it cold out? Aizawa heard Uraraka ask. Whatever the weather, it won't be cold inside the arena, Yaoyorozu pointed out. You can wear some of my band t-shirts, Jiro offered shyly, pushing a bang out of her face. Okay, Momo smiled, looking at Azui and Uraraka, who nodded back. Aizawa just managed to step out of the way before the door opened. Aizawa-sensei, Jiro muttered. I was wondering did you want a t-shirt as well? Jiro interrupted him. I have oversized ones. What? Oh, yes. Uraraka cried, Yaoyorozu and Azui cracking a smile behind her. I don't care, Aizawa settled on before being dragged down the corridor. This is going to be funny, Azui commented. Aizawa gave her a half-hearted glare. What were you wondering, sensei? Jiro asked as she opened the door to her own room and lightly kicked a bongo out of the way to let the 5 of them in. Did you want to eat before we go, or did you want to go half an hour earlier and find somewhere to eat? He asked, standing in the doorway. It's on me, he added, noticing the girl's intake of breath. We couldn't, Jiro stuttered. The question was, did you want to? Aizawa repeated. There's a good ramen shop just one stop away. Well, Jiro started, looking down at her feet before nodding. If that's okay with you. It's fine, Aizawa reassured her. We need to leave in about an hour then. Yes, sensei, the girls chorused as Jiro dived into her wardrobe, producing a black t-shirt. Here you go, Aizawa-sensei, she smiled, handing her teacher the top. It's large on me, so it should be baggy on you. Aizawa took it and opened it up, looking, and the logo, a plain death kanji character, with the band name, yes it really was death, written in what was assumably English below. Thank you, he muttered, wondering if he could afford to stick a coat on over the top. Oh, and you need this on your eyeline, Jiro added, grabbing some eyeliner from her desk. No way in hell would he. This is our stop, Aizawa grumbled, trying to look down so as to avoid eye contact with another living soul. Why wouldn't makeup come off in water? What was the point of that? The girls clamored, excitedly collecting their purses. They were all also wearing black eyeliner and wearing death t-shirts. At least they weren't alone. Approximately half the train looked the same, all chatting excitedly and taking photos. Aizawa wondered what he'd gotten himself into. The 5 left the train and Aizawa pulled them into the ramen shop, guiding them to a table and letting the waiter fetch some menus. He'd looked at Aizawa with a smirk as he'd fetched their drink orders, but Aizawa's glare pegged him down a notch with surprising speed. The girls hadn't noticed. They were looking at pictures of Yaoyorozu's second house near Shirakawa-go. Does it snow like that every year? Uraraka was asking as Momo was flicking through pictures of her family sledding. Usually, although it's not been snowing around Christmas much lately, usually January, she commented, handing Azui the phone so she could take a closer look. I don't usually go places that cold, ribbit, Azui smiled. But it looks so pretty. It looks so chill, Momo, Jiro added before looking up. Like literally. You'll have to come this winter, Yaoyorozu beamed. I want to invite all the girls, maybe some of the boys as well. Oh, who are you thinking? Azui smiled. Todoroki? Yaoyorozu asked. His Christmases seem. She trailed off, looking towards Aizawa, who pretended to be very interested in his coffee. Not relaxing, she finally decided. Yeah, his dad and him train like constantly, don't they? Jiro said, Momo giving her a pointed look and nodding towards their homeroom teacher. Well, it pays off, Azui added, steering the conversation. Exactly. He's insane in combat. Uraraka cried. We could invite Midoriya and Ida as well. Yeah, and Kaminari, Jiro grinned. I'll have to ask my parents, but I think a winter meetup is a brilliant idea, Yaoyorozu beamed. I've never really had many friends round before, and especially not at Shirakawa-go. Let's do it. Uraraka cried once more, nearly knocking over the waiter who came back to take their orders. Get what you want, Aizawa piped up, reaching over to cover prices on Uraraka's menu. Regardless of the money. Thank you, Aizawa-sensei, Uraraka smiled. I'll just expense it, Aizawa waved her away. He really had no idea if Yue would let him expense a meal out like this, but he didn't really care. It was nice. Did it count as getting the gossip? If it was true, he was going to kill Mineta. How about you, Aizawa? Azui dragged him into the conversation. How about me, what? He asked in his usual monotone. The girls giggled. Have you ever been to a concert before? She asked, the conversation taking a 180. Being friends with Mike is like being at a concert full-time, he quipped back. The girls laughed harder. Aizawa was surprised. He wasn't usually funny. Could Mike not control his quirk before? Yaoyorozu asked inquisitively. He said he used to forget to control it when he got excited, Jiro commented, taking a swig of her coke. Yeah, which was a lot, Aizawa replied, settling his own coffee down. I think he always thought that I needed to be more enthusiastic for some reason, so he would overcompensate. Were you in the same homeroom? Uraraka asked. Sat next to each other, Aizawa nodded. That's so cool. Jiro smiled. Did you get hired by the same agency? No, completely different ones, Aizawa sighed, realizing he would have to really start making conversation. Mike went over to the States and trained where All Might used to train actually. Aizawa watched the girls' mouths drop open with a smirk. It was fun impressing them with his best mate's achievements. Not for as long, however, he continued. His quirk is more useful over in Japan where there's less noise pollution. Plus, with the saturation of heroes, he wanted to start up his own secondary career. Teaching? Yaoyorozu asked. Radio presenting, Aizawa replied. Oh yeah, I've heard his stuff, Jiro commented. Not my music, but he's really easy to listen to. How did you get to work at UA then? Azui asked. We both got approached by Nizu, Aizawa continued as 5 steaming bowls of ramen were brought over to the table. Mike was drunk, so he said yes for the both of us on the spot. Mike was drunk? Yaoyorozu laughed. It was the middle of the night. He'd been drinking, I was working. How did Principal Nizu know about your quirk's abilities though? Azui asked, confused as she stirred her ramen. I can understand for you, sensei, but not Mike, ribbit. Oh, he was singing. The girls giggled again and Aizawa felt a smirk cross his lips. Don't tell anyone I told you that, he added as the 5 tucked into their meal. He was confident they would, but it didn't matter. At the end of the day, it was only embarrassing Hisashi, and Aizawa hardly ever got to indulge in that anymore. Could you not afford seats? Aizawa growled as he shoved himself between his students and a teenage couple who looked like they'd never heard of the phrase PDA in their life. The arena was packed, fans crowding around the stage. Most of the fans were older than his students, but Aizawa wasn't surprised that Jiro's music tastes matched her level of maturity. These tickets were more expensive if I'm being honest, Yaoyorozu smiled. Why? Aizawa growled. Because they're so close to the stage. Jiro grinned, craning her head so she could see. She was so excited she hadn't noticed Aizawa's dripping sarcasm. Right, he muttered. Just as he did, PDA guy shoved into him, spilling his drink down Aizawa's side. Oh sorry man, he cried with a grin before turning back to his girlfriend. Or who Aizawa hoped was his girlfriend. There were rare occasions that Aizawa wished he was All Might. Death was awful. Well, it lived up to its name at least. All the band members looked as if they couldn't care less, although apparently that was a thing because the members of the crowd looked as if they would sell their souls for the lead singer. Aizawa would rather sell his soul to a devil. Looking back at his students, he could tell that the music wasn't exactly any of their thing either, bar Jiro. Aizawa had brought Azui some noise-protective headphones and the teenager had them rammed on her head, instead, feeling the beat of the bass. Yaoyorozu was watching Jiro intently, trying to copy the words to the lyrics, grabbing onto the catchy chorus and loosing everywhere else. Uraraka was just enjoying the atmosphere, having never been to a concert before. They were all happy that their friend was happy, jumping and dancing along as best they could. There was one moment where Azui nudged Aizawa's arm and when he'd looked down she'd pointed to her own face, smiling. Getting the hint, Aizawa tried his hardest to smile back, only earning a frantic shaking of the head from the frog girl and the mouthing of the phrase, "Too scary?" PDA couple hadn't stopped making out. Aizawa wondered if maybe they'd accidentally knotted their tongues or something. Coming to the last set and the whole crowd seemed to shift forward as if they were expecting something big to happen. Aizawa felt himself lurch, wondering whether his safest option would be to move closer to his students or to maybe accidentally get into a threesome. "They're going to play my fave song," Jiro screamed over the crowd, her voice growing hoarse. "Which is?" Uraraka yelled back. "Dying," Jiro replied. Of course it was. Just as the intro played and the crowd erupted into screams, a guy pushed his way in front of them, his quirk leaving him with a long neck that was stretching upwards and blocking their view. Aizawa was almost grateful for the visual relief, but Jiro looked almost panicked, trying to jump up to grab a glimpse as the song began. Aizawa watched her and sighed. He hated death. He hated concerts. He hated PDA couple. But he couldn't help but like his students. He bent over and grabbed Jiro's shoulder, speaking into her ear so he could be heard over the screams. "Climb onto my shoulders." "What?" Jiro asked, still shouting. "Climb on," Aizawa shouted back, kneeling down. There was a second of his students gaping at him, but Jiro didn't need to ask if he was sure this time. She pushed her way behind him and lifted her legs across his shoulders, balancing herself so that he could stand up. Jiro was surprisingly well built, her thighs blocking Aizawa's ears, luckily inhibiting his ability to hear anything but her screams of joy. He focused on keeping her steady as she threw her arms up in the air through the chorus. But she was happy. And in Aizawa's books, that was all that mattered. The train back wasn't as crowded as the arena, granted, but Aizawa still found himself pushed against the window. All the teenagers leant around him fast asleep. "Aizawa-sensei," Jiro whispered from opposite him. She unplugged one earphone from the new Death album she'd brought from the merch stand. It was called Dead. "Obviously." "Yes," he replied quietly. "I don't want to seem rude, but why did you agree to come tonight?" she asked, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't know," he joked, but Jiro looked down at the floor. "I got asked too," he replied. "But you didn't have to say yes," Jiro pointed out. "I can't not say no to you damn kids." "I think Mike would have been better than me," Aizawa replied softly. "No, I'm glad you came," Jiro was quick to reply before going red. It was cool." "I'm glad I can be cool," he replied with a smirk. "You are Aizawa-sensei," Jiro smiled as she elongated one earphone. "Did you want to listen as well?" "Absolutely not," Aizawa replied.